Good evening. A quorum of the City Council being present, I call tonight's meeting to order. Please rise if willing and able to salute the flag and pause for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight's meeting is being recorded with audio and visual devices. There are hearing aids available for anyone who may require them. On a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to accept the minutes of the regular City Council meeting of March 18th, 2019, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes are adopted. We now move on to public comment. Public comment is the time in the meeting when members of the public can speak for up to 3 minutes on any issue that is on tonight's agenda, with the exception of communications and awaiting reports. To your left, you will see a screen that will count down your 3 minutes. At 15 seconds, you will hear a tone that is your indicator to start wrapping up, and then you will hear a second tone when your 3 minutes has expired. We ask that you please try to stick to those 3 minutes. We have a basket next to the podium. If your comments are in written form, please leave them in the basket. That makes it easier for our clerk. If your comments are in electronic form, please email them to us before midnight, to the clerk before midnight tonight, and they will be included in the minutes of tonight's record, and there are business cards with the clerk's information on the table as well. We ask that folks please address all comments to the chair and not to individual councilors. We also ask that folks please refrain from clapping, snapping, booing, anything that might be intimidating to a speaker. If you are the one person in the audience that has a different opinion than everyone else, we want you to feel comfortable getting up and stating that opinion and not feel that you're going to get shouted down. So with that, we will go to our first speaker, Justin Bloch. And when you come up to the mic, please state your name, your address, and the issue that you're speaking on. Thank you.
How's that? All right. I'm at 122 Berkshire Street in the eastern part of Cambridge. So I'm here talking about Public Order, I think, 140, the resolution for the Harvard Graduate Student Union in our negotiations with Harvard University. First, thank you to Councilor Siddiqui and Simmons and Toomey and Mayor McGovern for sponsoring this resolution. Many of you have been with us from the very beginning, back in 2015, when we first started organizing, in 2016, when we had our first election. So a little bit of history. We had an election in April where we, as a majority, voted to form a union, and we've been in contract negotiations with Harvard as graduate students who are also workers. In general, the process has been quite slow, and then it's been reflecting lack of urgency in addressing important student needs. I don't know if some of you know, but many student workers in our unit got a raise recently when the Massachusetts minimum wage went up. Other issues of, like, we have student workers who, when they need to go to the dentist, they fly home to their home countries. And I'm sure, as many of you have heard, sexual harassment and discrimination issues have been large issue, very important at universities generally and in institutions all over. Those are some of the issues that we're fighting for in our contract as student workers, and we won our election about a year ago, and we're still waiting for a contract. So your support means a lot to us in encouraging Harvard to grant us the rights and protections that we should have as workers, and to reflect the urgency of meeting the student needs that should be shown. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Sheehan? No? Javon? I didn't see him either. Oh, there you are. Didn't see you back there.
Thanks. My name's Jeevan Sobrino Wheeler. I'm a resident of 19 Trowbridge Street. I'd also briefly like to speak in favor of Policy Order 18 for the Graduate Students Union. As someone recently pointed out to me, our universities, upon which Cambridge depends, couldn't function without grad student workers, and it's about time we treated them as the workers they are. I'm here to speak in favor also of the cycling safety ordinance. The last time I was here to speak in favor of the ordinance, I talked about how a car swerved in front of me on Mount Auburn Street that doesn't have a protected bike lane, about how I fell off my bike onto my face as a result and lost part of my 2 front teeth, about how I've ended up with thousands of dollars of out-of-pocket dental bills as a result, but I'm still one of the lucky ones because at least I'm here to talk to you this evening, unlike the multiple other cyclists who have been killed on streets without protected bike lanes in Cambridge in the past few years alone, and how many of Cambridge's cyclists aren't biking just because it's good exercise or a green alternative. They're doing it out of necessity because they can't afford a car or are too young for one, like the kids I see biking to CRLS most days. That should be reason enough to support the cycling ordinance, but in case it isn't, I wanted to mention the benefits that protected bike lanes provide to pedestrians. You see, protected bike lanes are also a traffic calming tool because cars are less likely to treat a city street as a highway if that street has a protected bike lane. Adding protected bike lanes is a physical intervention, but it's also a signal that our streets are for people, whether they're cyclists, pedestrians, or drivers, and not just the cars they drive in. In parts of Philadelphia that have added bike lanes since 2009, traffic crashes of all kinds have decreased 30%, according to city officials there. I usually walk or bike to work, but today I drove because it was raining. And that puts me in the minority of all Cambridge residents. According to the 2019 Cambridge Neighborhood Statistical Profiles that were recently released by the city, only 31% of residents drive to work. Another 24% of people walk, and 30% take public transit, which also requires walking to the bus or T-stop. Many Canterburyans don't even have the option of driving. 2 of my roommates don't own cars, and of my girlfriend and her 3 roommates, I don't think any of them own a car. If we're only planning for cars using our streets, we're not planning for the vast majority of our residents. And here's my last point. Even when I'm a member of the minority of Cambridge residents driving to work, I still prefer streets with protected bike lanes. When I'm driving and I have to pass a cyclist on a street without a protected bike lane, I'm terrified that I'll hit a pothole and crash into the bicyclists. Protected bike lanes aren't just a good idea for the vast majority of Cambridge residents, they're also just good street design for everyone. That's why I hope the council will support the cycling safety ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. George Schneelock, followed by Meg Crench.
George Schneelock, 81 School Street, Apartment 1 in Somerville, speaking about the cycling safety ordinance. Please vote to pass the ordinance into law, but don't think that this will absolve you of your responsibility to prevent deaths and injuries. When you look at the overlap between the 5-year street and sidewalk plan and the Cambridge bike plan, you see there is not much overlap. If the city wants to prevent the next tragedy instead of reacting to one, it must build protected bike lanes much more quickly than the ordinance would require by itself. Cambridge could build protected bike lanes on just 2 streets, Mass Ave near Central Square and Mount Auburn Street, and make Mass Ave a safe transportation option all the way from Harvard Square to the Charles River, and a useful alternative to the Red Line when it is malfunctioning. These 2 segments add up to 1.5 miles. In just this month, April 2019, Somerville is expected to implement 4 bike infrastructure projects at Washington Street, Park Street, Temple Street, and Broadway, which will total more than 1.5 miles. Cambridge needs to act much more quickly to match the urgency of this problem. Still, the ordinance is quite an accomplishment, and you all deserve a lot of credit for everything you did to help. I'm happy to see the positive reactions to the ordinance of people in surrounding areas and even in cities far away from ours. I'm hopeful that the cycling safety ordinance will provide inspiration for communities in the rest of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg Crench.
Hi, thank you. And I'm here tonight with my husband, Joel Fleming.
Hey, how are you? Thank you to the council. My wife and I are residents at 129 Franklin Street, and we're here to speak today about policy order number 14, which relates to our specific units. So the unit that we live in is a one-bedroom lofted apartment. There are no interior walls. We have a window that looks out onto the corner of Green and Brookline Street, which is across from what used to be TT the Bears and is now the Middle East. We've lived in Cambridge for a long time. We're used to sort of the usual urban noises. The problem that brings us here today is that beginning in about September of 2018, the MBTA has established an idling station directly outside of our window. Not a bus stop, but an idling station where a bus remains for hours at a time. This is a photo that you can see the view. This is the view that we have directly from our bedroom window. So this is obviously, it's a noise concern to some extent, the idling sounds in the summer months. If we want to open the window, there's sort of diesel smell coming in. The real concern is that it's a privacy issue. For me, also particularly for my wife, that where the bus driver sits is elevated, obviously, because it's a bus, and so that gives them almost a direct line of sight into the bedroom. Not that they're trying to look in, but it's just uncomfortable, and this is the only window that we have in our unit, so this has been a significant problem. We've tried, mostly Meg has tried emails to state representatives, emails to the MBTA. People acknowledge the issue, but we've had trouble sort of getting a result. The signs remain up. Buses continue to park here on a regular basis. So we appreciate Councillor Zondervan and his staff's work to get tonight's resolution on calendar. We'd appreciate the support of the council in voting to adopt the resolution, which asks that the city manager reach out to the MBTA and work and see if we can come up with a better solution for this. Did I miss anything? So that's it. We thank the council for its time.
Thank you. Itmar Turner Trying and Kim Kaufman is next.
Hi, my name is Itamar Turner Trawing. I live at 139 Oxford Street in Cambridge. This is Ada. So I'm here to talk about the cycling safety ordinance. I want to thank you for your support so far as it went through the committee, and I urge you to support it today. And it's really exciting to see the city taking bicycling infrastructure as the default instead of something that has to be fought for. The limitation of the ordinance is that it's going to probably take decades until all the streets are rebuilt and the whole city is full of protected bike lanes. And my daughter's at King Open, and so they're moving to a new school and rebuilt school. And so as of next year, we're not going to have a route with protected bike lanes to bike her to or from school, which is unfortunate. And when she's old enough, it'd be great for her to bike to school on her own. And unless someone happens to rebuild these streets, the ordinance is insufficient. But if the city is going to put into law that protected bike lanes, that protected bike infrastructure is a default, there's no reason that we actually have to wait all these decades to make that default a reality. As soon as the ordinance passes, which I hope you pass it, we're saying that every road that is a major road, every road should have a protected bike lane, and suddenly we have this declared deficiency. Like all these roads are missing what they ought to have. And so I hope that the city takes this not only into account when rebuilding roads, but also on a much more aggressively and quickly adding protected bike lanes to all major streets in the city so that my daughter can bike to school, so that people can just use biking as a form of transportation that is safe and secure, and anyone from age 8 to age 80 can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Kaufman, followed by Ann Stewart.
Hi, my name is Kim Kaufman. I'm here I'm at 66C Hampshire Street in Cambridge. And I'm here to support the cycling safety ordinance. I'm super excited to hear that this is hopefully about to be voted into law. And I just want to thank the City Council for considering this and hopefully voting it through. And I just want to say that, I think that once this is voted through, you're going to see a lot more people. Once you have the protected bike lanes, you're going to see a lot more people that haven't even dared to cycle in Cambridge cycling. Like, for example, I just was in another city that had really great protected bike lanes with my mother, who's 86 years old, and she felt safe biking around, and it was fabulous. And I would love for her to come to Cambridge and be able to bike with me. So maybe someday when we get these in, and also for, as the former speaker the person that just spoke said, for the kids, and especially like the kids at the high school who have to get to school on their own, and a lot of them bike. I mean, I think it's the least we can do is provide these safe bike lanes for them to bike. So thank you, and I hope it's voted through.
Thank you. Ann Stewart?
Hi, I'm Ann Stewart. I live at 2531 Wheeler Street, and I really appreciate everything that the council is doing to pay attention to the Alewife area, to connectivity, to the biking. Maybe eventually we'll get an MBTA stop there too. Would that be nice? But I really hope that you will support the $50,000 that the city manager is appropriating. And maybe we're really going to have a neighborhood there. Thank you.
Thank you. Felix Owusu?
Hello. Hi, I'm Felix Owusu. I live at 239 Columbia Street, and I am here to talk about the Policy Order 140, I thought, which is about the Graduate Student Union resolution. Thank you guys for the time and also for your continued support of our unionization process at Harvard. So I'm a fourth-year PhD student in public policy at Harvard. I've, over my time, spent a lot of time doing teaching and research assistant work to support myself during my time in my PhD program. I was also a student worker at UC Berkeley, and I was a member of UAW Local 2865 there as a student worker as well. I'm hoping to ask you guys to vote in support of this resolution today. This is something that's very important for the student body at Harvard for several reasons. I've been here, like I mentioned, for 4 years, and when I first arrived on campus in 2015, these issues that we're fighting for today were sort of topics that were being organized around at that time as well. And after several years, we were able to get our unionization drive and vote resoundingly in favor of our union last year. At this point, it has been almost a full year since we voted for this, and the administration has not had as much movement on these things as we would need. I think these issues that we're talking about are urgent, and they're things that are happening now. They're things that cannot wait. And so there are real consequences to the time it's taking for these things to be passed. So as other people who have been speaking today have mentioned, a lot of the things that we're talking about are things as basic as getting paid on time or having stable income increases that can sort of keep up with the cost of living and rent increases in Cambridge, to a third-party grievance procedure for people dealing with sexual harassment and racial discrimination, disability discrimination, etc. If you have followed the news at all, it's not hard to find examples of, even specifically at Harvard, cases of sexual harassment being mishandled. There is no process for racial discrimination or other kinds of discrimination you might be facing on campus. And so sort of taking time and waiting an additional year for this is not really an option for people. I personally have dealt with not being paid on time. I've had friends who've had to take out loans in order to just get the money that they were already owed. I'm completely ignoring people who are being paid minimum wage for doing very high level and highly sort of trained work. So these are the issues that have been driving our union campaign, and now that we've voted in favor of this, I think it's important that we should be able to sort of get the contract that guarantees these things. It's been a full year, and in many of the cases when we've raised proposals, we've not received counter proposals, and we've only been able to meet a few times throughout the course of the year. I think it's only been 13 times, which is not enough for a unit as diverse and with as real needs as we have. And so I thank you guys for being strong supporters and hope that you'll vote in favor of this resolution, pushing the administration to bargain in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Boswell, followed by Robert Travers, Jr.
Good evening. My name is Mark Boswell. I live at 105 Walden Street, Cambridge. And I come tonight to speak in support of the cycling safety ordinance. I'm delighted that it has progressed this far. I look forward to it being ordained. It's difficult to overstate how helpful this will be when reconstructing our roads for the future. So not only will it help the city do things like make streets safer for all users, as we've already seen on streets like Western Ave, Cambridge Street, Vassar Street, and so forth, and it will allow unprecedented health and personal mobility opportunities for people of all ages. But equally important, it clearly demonstrates that Cambridge is regional a regional and quite possibly a national leader when it comes to progressive, sustainable transportation and public health. This council should be proud to have such an ordinance before it. Recently, I was at a film screening at the Harvard Graduate School of Design where they talked about the Netherlands and why the Dutch like to bike so much. But beforehand, I was working at a table for a local bike advocacy group, and a couple of visitors approached, and usually I say, here are the recent projects, current projects, would you like to know more, maybe get involved? And they said, well, no thanks, we live in Dorchester, we already have a bad case of Cambridge envy. So I didn't know that was a thing, but I think if this ordinance passes, I think you'll see a lot of people with Cambridge envy. So cycling safety ordinance, please vote yes.
Thank you. And please, leave your comments. That's great. Thank you. Robert Travers Jr. Let's see if Bobby's here. No. Robert O'Neill. Followed by Martha Zerbel.
Robert O'Neill from 175 Hallworthy Street in Cambridge. And I'm here just to touch on a couple of points regarding the airplane noise. It seems a little inconsistent with your comment prior to this public session where you're not supposed to speak on the awaiting reports, but it was suggested if I did have an opinion to speak. So I just want to say that I appreciate the efforts of the City Council to highlight and help address the significant negative impacts on Cambridge residents and surrounding communities that result from airplane noise disturbances from the concentrated flight paths of Logan Airport's runway 33. The airplane noise disturbances also negatively impact large numbers of people that enjoy the Fresh Pond Reservation, a vital wooded area and open space resource for the densely populated cities and used also by many surrounding communities. I think including a noise consultant in the city budget to help understand the impacts of future changes of Logan's operations on city residents is a positive step, and I encourage the City Council and its consultant to make note of a recent study conducted by Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health entitled Optimizing Airport Flight Patterns Take a Toll on Human Health. It was published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. The study concludes, among many things, that increased noise associated with concentrated RNAV flight patterns potentially pose serious threats to nearby communities, including cardiovascular disease and other disorders as a consequence of the repeated noise exposure that, as many of us have experienced, can go on for hour after hour, day after day. When winds are from the north and northwest, flight departures from 33L pass over North and West Cambridge at frequencies ranging from 30 seconds or less to one every 1 or 2 minutes, resulting in sometimes up to 400 to 500 flights passing over in a single day. I encourage the City Council to use its resources to alert and inform affected Cambridge residents that they can affect beneficial change by consistently submitting complaints to Massport and help the FAA and Massport understand the true magnitude and detrimental impact on the quality of life in Cambridge from the concentrated flight path approach. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so there's no confusion, this is the report. It's on awaiting reports, but it's also on the city manager agenda number 8. It just hasn't been removed from awaiting reports yet. So,
Thank you.
Martha.
My name is Martha Zerbel. I live at 175 Holworthy, and I also am commenting on airplane noise. I do appreciate that the city is supporting action to address the airplane noise problem, and I hope they will continue to do so. The airplane noise impacts us both in our use and enjoyment of Fresh Pond and use and enjoyment of our property. Last weekend, the noise was particularly bad at both places. Flights over Fresh Pond were constant as we walked around it. It just disturbs conversation and it really disrupts any restorative powers that a walk at Fresh Pond Reservation can have. And flights over our home were ongoing when I was doing yard work, and this huge, huge low plane flew over the house. I know it was higher, but my visual impression is it was just 100 feet or so above me. I later checked the Massport flight tracker and found it was a British Airways Airbus A380, which is the largest passenger plane in the world currently in use. It made a lot of noise, too. When we're indoors, it's hard to stay focused on work or to sleep with constant repetitive noise, with flights sometimes around the clock. I'm very glad the city is adding funding in FY 2020 for noise consultant to study this issue. I would request that the city needs to make sure that the impacts of the frequency and the duration of the noise are addressed, as well as the sound level of the noise. As we all now realize, the sound impact of repetitive airplane noise is greater than the impact of an occasional airplane, even if it generates the same sound. Thanks very much.
Thank you. If you could leave your comments in the basket. Thank you. Anthony Galuccio. We'll see Anthony. There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Honorable members of the City Council. She here in support of the appropriation for design money for Terminal Road. As a longtime resident of the Highlands, someone who coaches Little League in West Cambridge, is in there a lot, up there a lot, and also representing Westbrook Realty, who developed 55 Wheeler Street. This was a bypass road that was sort of discovered as an opportunity by neighbors just to get residents around the rotaries. So it's not going to solve every problem, but we think it will bring a lot of relief to local residents, and this design study is the first step. So not a complicated issue or a sexy one, but I think it will go a long way in helping local residents. So thanking the mayor and the council for moving forward with it. Thanks.
Thank you. Ed Abrams, followed by Elizabeth Camacho.
Hello, my name is Ed Abrams. I live at 80 Wendell Street in Cambridge, and I'm commenting on the LED streetlights policy order 2018 number 197. After 4 years of complaints from me and dozens of other residents, I'm happy that the Blue Rich LED streetlights, it's 4,000 K color temperature, are scheduled to be replaced by warmer alternatives as they fail. However, this policy, in my opinion, needs to be more aggressive in replacing the harmful Blue Rich LED streetlights. Blue light at night is widely recognized as a threat to human and animal health. The city of Cambridge vastly increased light pollution by installing these streetlights. A 2016 AMA report concluded that white LED streetlights may contribute to the risk of chronic disease in the populations of cities in which they've been installed. The AMA recommends minimizing and controlling blue-rich lighting by using the lowest emission of blue light possible in order to reduce potential negative effects on human health. In my opinion, the city of Cambridge should follow the AMA guidelines and immediately replace the, they're called 4,000 K CCT with the ones that the AMA recommends, which are under 3,000 K CCT. Many residents have complained about these lights, but unfortunately the response has not been positive from especially the previous city manager and Steve Lankauskas, who's the city electrician. Additionally, the shields that they use to supposedly shield the lights just don't work. They're more like filters. So what I propose is a new policy order directing the city manager and electrical department to install international dark sky approved warm white shielded streetlights immediately throughout the city. Priority should be given to areas where residents have complained about excessive brightness, including my street. The priority should be present and future public health over the cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth Camacho, followed by Sam Feigenbaum.
I'm Elizabeth Camacho. I'm Elizabeth Camacho at 24 Corporal Burns Road, addressing the Housing Committee Report number 3. I have already discussed some of my concerns about 100% overlay and submit my 3 previous letters by way of review. Tonight, I want to emphasize concerns for the impact of such overlay on those of us homeowners who are already here. I don't fully understand the meaning of by right, but think it would allow a taller building with larger footprint to be built on property where a developer builds 100% affordable units, with no guarantee for accommodating the impact on abutters. As my husband and I have already found out, increased development or changes in a property can be expensive for those living next door. It cost us $4,500 about 10 years ago to keep out water that was beginning to flood the cellar again after years of no problems. A combination of tree removal, a sick one by us, and a cheap renovation of the house next door using replacement windows that now bow is requiring us to replace melting vinyl on that side of the house with hardy board at the cost of $10,600. I ask that impacts on current residents be kept in mind when developing an affordable overlay. Possible examples: if a shadow cast by a taller building raises my utility costs, the developer needs to work with me to get solar energy into my home. Or a larger housing footprint will require the developer to install a drain on my property to prevent water from pooling on my walkway and getting into the cellar. I hope the proposed 100% overlay gives priority to residences that middle and lower income families can own, or is the emphasis on rental units? I hope not. Homeowning is something middle income folks aspire to and expect and lower income folks aspire to. I, for one, hope that our city aids that by working a zoning overlay that achieves home ownership, not just renting. However, doing that alone will not succeed in the long run if city development makes houses too expensive to repair and maintain. Will affordable units, house or rental, builders be required to use energy efficient means of construction? Solar energy, insulation with a good R factor, trees planted on the property to afford shade and lessen cooling costs. Can the city set aside funds from property taxes or even a raise for no interest loans to help income qualifying homeowners make major repairs? It does no good to build affordable housing if a family can't afford to keep it up. My husband and I are lucky. We have enough saved to do the needed repairs, although canceling some long-awaited plans in order to finance them. Perhaps Cambridge is working to solve a problem that is something we can't solve alone. Maybe once upon a time, but not now. When Jacob Wyeth built Fresh Pond Hotel in the 1700s, Cambridge was country. Arlington, then a part of Cambridge, was a farming village. In 1807, it and parts of what are now Belmont became West Cambridge.
Elizabeth, can you leave your comments in the basket?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Sam, followed by Jason Alves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Sam Feigenbaum. I'm a volunteer with Cambridge Bike Safety. I'd like to read a statement that the city manager has made to our group, and that will be posted on the city's website tomorrow, detailing how he understands the term rare circumstances in the exceptions section of the cycling safety ordinance. Here's the statement. I've been asked about the term rare circumstances and how it may influence the cycling safety ordinance. I take rare to mean rare in a layman's sense of the word, and in the context of the ordinance, it is something which is infrequent, irregular, and exceptional. If an exception needs to be made, I fully understand that it will test trust and good faith dialogue exercised during this process. I am committed to this ordinance, and I am committed to maintaining the trust of the public. I look forward to continuing to work with all stakeholders to ensure Cambridge streets remain safe for all users. So that's the statement. And then on behalf of myself and Cambridge Bike Safety, I urge the City Council to pass the cycling safety ordinance. It will save lives. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Jason? Jason Alves, I didn't see him. Skip Schloming, followed by Patrick Barrett.
Hi, my name is Skip Schloming, 102 Inman Street. I'm commenting on the committee report number 3, the zoning overlay. Everybody wants affordable housing, and yet I'm trying to get across to people that affordable housing is not affordable. It is very expensive to build. The report you have pins the cost of one unit of affordable housing at $540,000, over $500,000. And that just buys the property and builds it or remodels it. It doesn't support a tenant because on the market rate, that housing would get a high rent. So you've got to have ongoing tenant vouchers or subsidies to sustain that. For 30 years of vouchers in that one unit, that would cost about another $500,000. So we're giving $500,000 to one household. And according to Chris Cotter and the statistics from the city, the present amount of affordable housing is 14.8% of all the housing in the city, and adding apparently about $30 million over 30 years, or building a certain number over by 2030, you will get enough housing out of the limited amount of money you have to push 14.8 up to about 16. You're helping a very tiny number of people, and I do not see the justification of the city spending basically $1 million for a very few households. If you were to take that money and put it into vouchers and work it out some way with the state or some arrangement, you would be able to support almost 3 times the number of households. You would be able to say, knock $1,000 off of 3 times the number of households over 30 years. So I'm saying that the combination of doing affordable housing, and then the same advocates that get it, it's tax money, want rent control and all the rest of the housing. This kind of a policy is just bankrupt. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. If your comments are written, please leave them in the basket. Patrick Barrett, followed by Heather Hoffman. Sorry, I called Patrick Barrett.
Oh my God, the public shaming
Easy what a
continues.
haircut and a shave will do.
Transformation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I think. Honorable City Council, my name is Patrick Barrett, 41 Pleasant Street. I am here just to discuss briefly committee report number 25. As you know, I have a zoning petition in Kendall Square. The planning board gave us a very favorable review, as did the ordinance committee. I hope that it is pushed forward, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Hoffman, followed by Charles Franklin.
Hello, Heather Hoffman, 213 Hurley Street. I have a few things to talk about. I wanted to start with the banner about the Adopt a Tree program. I think that's fabulous, and I hope that the city will take this to heart and treat its own trees well, and will protect its own urban forest, including perhaps the Alewife Reservation, where the city is denying, and that a developer cut down 12 trees on state land. The city could help. Now I'd like to talk about special signs at vape shops. As none of you probably know, one of the things that I took a lot of classes in law school was the First Amendment. I still find it very interesting. And it seems to me that you could probably craft something like this, although I do not know at what level of government you would need to do it. We've already decided that vaping is a public health risk because we've made a minimum age. So at the very least, it seems to me you ought to be able to do something that says you can't have signs that attract people who are not old enough. That was certainly done with cigarettes. And whatever people may think of the actual dangers of vaping, it seems to me that legally speaking, you can do that. Now I wanted to talk about changing the names of streets. I hope that in considering this, you'll think about how far you want to go. Because at a point in our history, just about everyone of means, at the very least, benefited from the slave trade. Certainly, the wealth of New England was built on the triangle. We made the rum. So, while I completely agree that we should not be celebrating people who thought it was perfectly okay to buy, sell, and own human beings, I also want to be sure that we don't become so picky about it that we lose sight of just where in this whole continuum we want to stop. And now to lights. as I look around my neighborhood, I am reminded how the city has done nothing at all about light pollution. I've been lucky enough not to be bothered by the street lights, but when I look around, I look at the office buildings that are blazing beacons from the moment it gets dark enough to be able to tell until I've already gone to sleep and can't see them anymore. We need to deal with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Franklin.
Good afternoon. Charles Franklin, 162 Hampshire Street. As always, good to see everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. First, I just want to say that I'm ecstatic about the $1.28 million being spent for a STEAM creative space. A lot of children, I knew when I was a child, really learned best through hands-on creative thinking. When you can touch it, you can feel it, you can build it. That's really important for a lot of children, and as a public resource, it's indispensable, and it's phenomenal. So thank you. On students, 1/3 of our population, not quite 1/3, 30% of our population are students, undergrad or graduate. 20,000 are graduate students. They keep the universities running. If all the graduate students disappeared, the university work would come to a halt. So, definitely want to support our grad students. And last on cyclists. I remember the first time I saw someone get doored. They were angry. They were angry. But that was a mask for fear, because he feared for his life. I don't bike in the city, because I don't feel that it's safe. The last 3 times I biked in the city, 2 near misses and 1 actual hit. And I argued with the man for about 5 minutes. We both took a breather. He actually offered me some water. We shook hands and parted ways. So I support the cyclist ordinance as well. Thank you.
Thank you. You can leave those for us or email them. Great. So now we're going to circle back. Jessica Sheehan? No? Mr. Travers?
Good evening, Mayor McGovern, members of the City Council. My name is Robert Travers. I reside at 54 Fulkerson Street. I'm a staff member at the PBD School and treasurer of the Cambridge Education Association. I will be speaking tonight about City Manager's Agenda Number 1. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of all staff members at the PBD School. We urge the Council to support the City Manager's appropriation recommendation of $800,000 from free cash to the Public Investment School Department Extraordinary Expenditures Account for building upgrades at the PBD and Baldwin schools. We want our schools to be healthy and mold-free to ensure that the staff, students, and public can work and learn safely. I wish to submit a petition from all 60 staff members assigned to the PBD school urging the Council to support it. Also, we would like to request that we be included in any updates and know the timeline for this repair to ensure that the problem will be addressed quickly and be completed before the start of school in late August. Also, could the City Council please supply the PBD school principal or myself with the contact information? Thank you, and we hope you will support this appropriation.
Thank you. Jason?
Hi, Jason Alves, Executive Director of the East Cambridge Business Association, 877 Cambridge Street. I'm here to speak on Policy Order 1, 7, and 11, all regarding small businesses. The recycling program has probably been the best thing that the council's done or the city's done for small businesses in recent history. It's been something that's been a real cost saver for folks, and I think when we talk about things that the council and the city can do, it's always good to go in and evaluate the services that the city could be providing that they're currently paying for. And the recycling program has been great. Hopefully that there's going to be money to expand that to citywide next year, and also to expand it to composting. Composting is another, if we're already doing recycling, it would be great if we could start to include composting. Also, wanted to talk about Policy Order 15 and Unfinished Business 6. So I know the cannabis regulations have been being talked about for a long time. It's worth pointing out that with the new cannabis shops, we're also getting a number of smoke shops and paraphernalia stores. So on Cambridge Street, we currently have 3 smoke shops. We have 2 cannabis, medical cannabis permitted on either end of the street. And with the new regulations, it looks like we'll probably be able to squeeze in a 3rd outside of those buffer zones, and then we'll have the additional economic impacted licenses within there. So I think it's just something that we wanted to put on the council's radar as you're considering these regulations tonight and going forward. I think a lot comes with just the standard adult use and medical use. So just wanted to put those 2 things on your radar for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that is the end of those who have signed up to speak. Mr. Williamson, I see your hand up. If there's anyone who did not sign up to speak on an issue on tonight's agenda but would like to, after Mr. Williamson is done, just come up to the mic, state your name, address, and the issue you're speaking on.
Thank you. James Williamson, 1000 Jackson Place in Cambridge. I want to speak, I have some questions about the bicycle ordinance as proposed. The current language says, comply with the Cambridge Bicycle Plan or any plan superseding it. That seems to me to be a green light for somebody to come up with whatever they want at some time in the future, and if it's deemed by somebody somewhere to supersede the existing plan, well, then that's what it's going to be. I don't think that's good transportation planning or good public policy. I think the entire community needs to be involved in making decisions about how and where we do infrastructure in the city, and in this case specifically the protected bike lanes. We've seen, I think Western Ave is an example where many people feel that that was a success. Mass Ave, the piece between Sydney and Memorial Drive, we already have preliminary data from the MBTA showing that the buses have been slowed down by, in both directions, by 9 minutes. Whatever, however that's going to evolve, we don't know yet. So people tend to talk about bikes versus automobiles, which is kind of very convenient. But guess what? People take buses and people walk in the city. And we shouldn't, I don't think, just be talking about a bicycle plan that I don't think has been well vetted across the city. We saw the reaction to the way it was implemented on Cambridge Street, an uproar from business people. We saw the reaction to the way it was implemented on Brattle Street, 2-directional bike lane, because people who are in the bicycle advocacy circles look at maps and decide this is where we want to go. Wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And they have allies in the city staff who help make this happen. The rest of us are left out. Transit is left out. Pedestrians are left out. There should be a pedestrian plan. There was. I believe I saw on the agenda for the most recent pedestrian committee that they are in fact now moving to take another look at updating the pedestrian plan. Why go ahead with one piece of our overall transportation policy until we've got a revised pedestrian plan that we can work in synergy with a bicycle plan and also a transit plan? There are what people call synergies between a transit plan and a bicycle plan. SHAROs, shared bike and bus lanes. So I think there's a mistake is being made locking in something that's not going to have public review, that's not going to have a transit plan, that's not going to have a pedestrian plan. And frankly, I don't think that infrastructure is the only answer to bicycle safety, even for bicyclists. I think bicyclists, if there were better enforcement and better and clearer rules, I think lives would be saved as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Peter Valentine, 37 Brookline Street. What good is the government if it says we can't do anything about it? Okay? No more big buildings in Central Square. Okay? You say you can't. You say, oh well, they can build anything they want. Okay, that's ridiculous. Okay, it's just common sense. How many people can sit in your chair? Okay, so either you're going to make laws and you're going to stand firm and have a vision of what a sane city should be like. And Cambridge, the United States of America was born in Cambridge. So Cambridge sets the modality for the vision of the nation, okay? No more big buildings in Central Square, and take control of the situation and be a government instead of just saying, oh, we're the government, but we can't do this and we can't do that.
Is there anyone else who did not sign up for public comment who would like to speak on a topic on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, on a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to close public comment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and public comment is closed. We move to reconsiderations. There are none. We move to the city manager's agenda on a motion by Councilor Simmons to bring the city manager's agenda before us for discussion and adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The agenda is before us. Pleasure of the council. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I'd like to pull items 3, 6, and 8, please.
Pleasure of the council. Councilor Mallon?
Can I pull number 1 and number 9, please?
You beat me to it. Councilor Carlone?
Number 7, please.
Pleasure of the council. That leaves on the consent agenda number 2, 4, and 5. Roll call.
On the consent agenda, Council Carlone?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux?
Yes.
Council Kelly? Council Mallon?
Yes.
Council Siddiqui?
Yes.
Council Simmons?
Yes.
Council Toomey? Council Zondervan?
Yes.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
And the consent agenda items are adopted on the affirmative vote with 9 in favor.
We now move back to city manager agenda item number 1, transmitting communication from Louis A. DePasquale, city manager, relative to the appropriation of $800,000 from free cash to the Public Investment Fund School Department Extraordinary Expenditures account for building upgrades at the Peabody Elementary School and the Baldwin Elementary School. This was pulled by Councilor Mallon. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager. I just wanted to check in. On January 28th, on the city manager's agenda, we allocated some money to do some exploring around mold in 4 different elementary schools. Were these 2 of the 4 that were discussed at that meeting?
These are 2 of those. I may have Mr. Maloney come. We had 2 items on the agenda, and I was actually here to speak to one, which was the statutory transfer, and I believe that Mr. Maloney can speak to the, right. Oh, did I have that now?
Hello, Mr. Maloney.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yes, so on January 28th, there was an allocation that we voted for to look into mold remediation at 4 different elementary schools, and I was wondering if these were 2 of the 4, and if the other 2 just didn't have mold, or if that was already remediated without this additional expenditure?
So you're correct. In January, we did the transfer to pay for the mold remediation. And there were 4 buildings. What this appropriation does is it addresses issues specifically at the Morse and, at the Baldwin and at the Peabody building that were identified in that remediation process. There's also going to be some additional work at the Morse with some of this money for reinstallation of piping. These are the next steps beyond the remediation. Mr. Travis spoke earlier about it. Those buildings have been cleared of mold back in the fall. And we identified several issues. There will be some additional repair work needed down the road. We'll monitor it this summer more closely. But specifically, this appropriation is for a new chiller at the Peabody for immediate facade improvement where obvious failure in some of the caulking and cement at the Baldwin and the Peabody building, and also then for the reinstallation of piping at all 3 of the buildings, Morse, Peabody, and Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Maloney, just to speak to Mr. Travers' point about the timeline of work, can you talk a little bit about that and whether or not it'll be ready
Sure.
and done by the end of the summer?
At the Peabody, the chiller will not be replaced until the fall because we want to have air conditioning in that building. We'll monitor it during the summer. Where the greatest mold buildup in the Peabody occurred this past summer was in areas that were locked and secured, not used over the summer. And we feel that by now being aware of the problem, monitoring more closely, we'll be on top of that. But the chiller, obviously, we don't want to take the air conditioning out of service for the summer programs that are in the building.
Thank you. And so then, if it's not replaced until the fall, how long, do you have any idea how long it will take? And if
It
that's
will
gonna
be in
disruptive?
place for the following years. It's not a major capital project. It's fairly straightforward, hopefully. Once the air systems are turned down for the air conditioning, we will go in this fall, early winter, and replace the chiller, and it should be fine for the summer of 2020.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Maloney.
I got Councilor Zondervan and Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, can you say more about the chiller replacement? Did we know that was going to happen? I'm feeling a little bit like surprised that we're getting another appropriation. And so if you could give us a sense of, should we be expecting more work? What's the...
Well, yes. First of all, the Peabody building, the chiller is actually nearing its life end anyway. Number one. Number two, it appears from the engineer's review that chiller was probably undersized when the building was first done 25 years ago, 20 years ago anyway. That was one of the issues that was identified that was a major contributor to the mold growth. I think the buildings that were done in the 90s, we like to think of as the new buildings in Cambridge, but a lot of the equipment, the HVAC equipment in those buildings are nearing the end of their useful life. So I think you may see more of these over the coming years, yes.
Councilor.
Okay, thank you. And we did get some concerns from the employees that the space is not quite fit for work. Can you give us a sense of when that will be resolved?
Sure. It is fit to work. At this point, we were made aware of this mold in late August, early September, particularly late August, when people returned to work in areas that were basically sealed for the summer, not in use, office space in particular. We did the remediation during that period of time. We've tested, retested, and the air quality in that building, and it's been fine for a while now.
Thank you. I wasn't referring to the air quality, but the actual state of the office space.
That also has been tested, yes.
Are you, Councilor Zondervan, if I can clarify, are you asking about the physical space?
I believe that is now reoccupied.
We're getting reports that there are ceiling tiles missing, that there's still, it's not fully resolved. And so we're just trying to get an understanding when that will be done.
So the remediation has occurred. If there are ceiling tiles missing, those can be replaced. At this point, I'm not aware of that. They also could be removed for other reasons more recently. They could be the original. I'm not sure. I will double check on that in the morning. But other than that, there should be no issues there in that building.
Okay.
Ceiling tiles are actually usually held in supply in the building itself, so they can be readily replaced, I hope.
Well, that apparently has not been done. So if you could make sure that
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilor Kelly, followed by Councilor Siddiqui.
Thanks. This doesn't have to do with mold, but I can't I can't miss the opportunity.
Stay on topic, Councilor Kelly.
It's not about the Peabody School, so it's close. I just wanted to express a thank you for the custodial support for the North Cambridge Family Opera. It was really astounding, and I figured I'd save myself an email by thanking you now.
Thank you.
Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you. Through you, we've received a lot of emails, and it seems from the emails that there's parents who are actively worried about their kids. So if there's a way, following on upon Councilor Mallon's point, to get the information about timeline to be in constant, whether that's the flyer you mail out, whether you're calling the families or something efficient, but just communicating with the families that what the timeline is and that you're working on the situation, because I don't want the families to worry about their kids so much.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I will say that we have done that in the fall. I think what we may be seeing now is, now that we've come for the additional money, that it's sort of reminded people that this was an issue that existed. But absolutely, we'll send out a new notification as well.
Councilor Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick follow-up. It sounds like you dealt quickly with this. Mold is a pretty scary situation. Was there an increase in kids and staff being sick, or it never got to that point?
We have not seen that. We have one employee at another building that may or may not have had an issue, but we've not seen any stepped-up increase due to the mold of either staff or students.
That's the true test of acting quickly. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just real quickly on the notification piece, I think sometimes because I know notifications did go out, but sometimes we send out notifications once or twice, and then, people can miss them, and then we assume everyone got them, and then it rises above again.
Absolutely.
So as long as we can I think we should send multiple emails, and not everyone's going to look at an email either. So, let's make sure that we're putting information maybe physically in the school itself, as well as sending home in backpacks and other things. But I do think we responded, quickly to this, and I'm certainly happy, and I think, to approve the appropriation. So if there is nothing further, roll call.
Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Yes.
Council Kelly. Council Mallon.
Yes.
Council Siddiqui.
Yes.
Council Simmons.
Yes.
Council Toomey. Council Zondervan.
Yes.
Mayor McGovern.
Yes.
And agenda item number 1 is adopted on the affirmative vote of 9.
We now move to City Manager Agenda Item Number 3, transmitting communication from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to the appropriation of the FY19 EOPSS HSD Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Grant for $8,000 received from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Highway Safety Division to the Grant Fund Police Department Salary and Wages account, which will be for personnel overtime services and will be dedicated to initiatives that address pedestrian and bicycle issues, coupling educational projects with enforcement of laws to reduce pedestrian and bicycle injuries and crashes. I need a drink of water. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was longer than, on a per-word basis, than the $8,000, I think. Well, through you to the police commissioner and so forth. So $8,000 is not a huge amount of money. I was hoping that you could sort of describe what this will buy us, the approximate duration of the efforts, and sort of put it in the context of other efforts. And it talks about addressing bicycle or pedestrian and bicycle issues. There are lots of issues on the street. Often we hear about, bike lane obstructions, that sort of thing. We also hear from people who say that there are cyclists riding without lights at night and, putting pedestrians at risk. So I want to acknowledge that enforcement is very much a piece of the three-legged stool that we'll be talking later about infrastructure, which is obviously very visible. Sometimes the enforcement is less visible, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about what we're doing. It also mentions education, which is the third leg of that stool.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, so just to give you an idea of what the $8,000, what we can do with the $8,000, to put it in context. In 2018, we had about $4,000, $3,973 to be exact. And our enforcement, obviously, designed to, increase the safety of cyclists and pedestrians. We used a total of 76 hours. We stopped 202 motor vehicles, 27 cyclists, and 9 pedestrians. During those encounters, we issued 74 citations for speeding, 13 for red light violations, 8 for crosswalk violations, and 96 other violations, which of the 96, the majority of those were made up for illegal left-hand turns, particularly in Inman Square. During our interaction with cyclists, we issued citations for failure to stop the red light for a stop sign and failure to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. As it pertains to our ability to enforce cyclists with lights, obviously the statute requires a forward-facing white light and a red light in the back, and we are able to enforce that. I don't have those numbers here with me right now, but I would gladly, parse the database and send the council an email as to what our enforcement looked like in that area.
So thank you. So those numbers were based on last year's equivalent, which was half of what we're doing this year. So that's a significant increase, and I appreciate that, and I think it's certainly important. So you'll be doing sort of the same types of things, but more of them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the exact same things, Vice Mayor, and what I forgot to address was the education component, which primarily amounts to us having our public information officer put information out on the various social media networks.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kelly?
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing. I, as you know, have some different thoughts about how aggressive we're doing it. Not for discussion here, but at some point, hopefully I'll be on that CPD enforcement bandwagon, but I'm just not there now. So thank you.
Councilor Toomey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, the Commissioner. I would just ask that you and the traffic enforcement step up with cyclists at night that have absolutely no lights on and are dressed all in black. I mean, I almost hit someone again last night at the Cambridge Common. All of a sudden the person was just swerved in front of me, and there's no lights at all. And for their own safety, I just think it's imperative. And that's one of the reasons I have an issue with this bicycle safety ordinance that's coming later, but I'll talk about that then. But I just am amazed that someone would put themselves in jeopardy on the busy roads without the proper lighting or a bicycle helmet. And so I just ask that you redouble the efforts, stopping people, at least remind them that, the times I would pull up beside someone and say, would you please get a light for your own safety to the bicyclist. But I'm just amazed that the lack of safety on some, it's not just bicyclists, pedestrians and motorists and all that, but it's just, to me, is unacceptable.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner.
Counselor, the same thing happened to me. It's a scary situation. To add insult to injury, the individual was dressed in all black. It was just by the grace of God that I was able to avoid him. So we'll pick that up. But I do share your appreciation for the danger caused by no lights in those situations.
Councilor Carlo?
Thank you. Commissioner, I hope you got that person who almost hit you. My question is 79 hours. I assume that's not consecutive hours or in 1 week. It's spread out. And can I assume, is it true that that's at peak hour or at those critical hours when you do need a light? Is that true?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Carlone, yes, you can assume that they're during the peak hours, during the rush hours, both in the morning time and in the afternoon, when it will make more sense to enforce them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Mallon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So unlike my earlier colleague, I am actually on the enforcement bandwagon. We've been talking about enforcement in this chamber so much lately, and I've had the opportunity to drive through Central Square, and one of our police officers was actually out of his vehicle just looking sternly at traffic. And we were all on our best behavior, everybody, myself included. There wasn't a person parked in a bike lane. There wasn't anyone taking an illegal left-hand turn. So I am for the visible enforcement. Just this weekend, we got tweeted from Central Square, a number of trucks that were parked in the bike lanes. So as much visible enforcement that we can be doing to keep people safe, I think I'm on board. So thank you for putting this in.
Thank you, Councilor.
Okay, I'll go back around. We'll go Kelly and Carlo. Councilors.
Thank you. One clarification is that if you're over 16, you don't need to wear a bicycle helmet. And I am not advocating that police enforce the bicycle helmet. I don't know how you would successfully enforce bicycle helmets for unsupervised children under 16. So if you can figure out a way to do that, great, but I suspect it may create more problems than it might solve. As far as enforcement goes, in my opinion, the more the merrier. I just don't think we do enough of it and that this is effective enough. My kids get tickets, and I think it's great because the thought that they'll get a ticket helps them take their own safety more responsibly, and it makes them better cyclists. The thought that I got my first ticket in California when I was in the Marines in like 1985, and it was a novelty then, but I think it's an important thing to aggressively enforce traffic laws for everyone. The caveat being, I think we need to be very intentional about delivery trucks and bike lanes, because if what we're doing is having them circle the block, making right-hand turn after right-hand turn until they find a spot, we may very well be creating a more dangerous situation with turning trucks as opposed to non-moving trucks. And I don't have a great answer for that, but I think we want to be intentional about what we do there. Thank you.
Councilor Carlo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As my fellow councilors were commenting and you were answering, Commissioner, when we see a truck in a bike lane clearly stopped and unloading, is there any benefit for us to take a picture and send it to the police? Is a warning sent out? Or to make it clear that this is a fine in the making?
We have initiated, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have initiated several citations that way as well.
Good.
But it's obviously not the most popular way. The most common way, is what I mean to say, is we come across them and then we stop them and issue the ticket normally. But I have gotten those in my email, and then we have sent them to the traffic enforcement unit for follow-up.
Thank you.
I think the tough part certainly with the delivery trucks is that they just build that cost into doing business. And so, unless the fine is so outrageous, they just kind of write it off. But
well, excuse me, through you and to you, Mr. Mayor, the new statute allows us to issue a fine at the state ordinance. But my point is the citation goes to the driver and not to the truck or company. So it's more than just the cost of doing business. It adds
that'll work
to your license.
Yeah. All right. Anything further? Roll call.
Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Yes.
Council Kelly. Council Mallon.
Yes.
Council Siddiqui.
Yes.
Council Simmons. Council Toomey. Council Zondervan.
Yes.
Mayor McGovern.
Yes.
And agenda item number 3 is adopted on the affirmative vote with 7 in favor, 1 recorded in the negative, and 1 recorded as absent.
We now move to City Manager Agenda Item Number 6, transmitting communication from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to the appropriation of $300,000 from Parking Fund balance to the General Fund Traffic and Parking Department Other Ordinary Maintenance Account to cover additional fiscal year 2019 operating expenditures for expanding separated bike lane network, feasibility and desirability of a potential extension of Terminal Road to Wheeler Street, and projected additional expenses relating to ongoing building renovation work at the Traffic Department offices. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, and through you, I am pleased to hear that the Wheeler Street study for circulation can move forward. Just for people who aren't aware, during the permitting process for the 520 units on Wheeler Street, there was a lot of discussion about how the circulation pattern from Wheeler Street around to Fawcett Street to Concord Avenue at the Trader Joe's Rotary was going to work. And During those special permit hearings, we started to come up with the idea that maybe there was a way to create a little connector, essentially, alongside the Eversource substation over to Terminal Road, which is that sort of apparently state-owned road that goes back around to the Fresh Pond Mall. So as Anthony Galluccio noted, this is not meant to be a panacea for solving the Alewife traffic problem. Would that existed, but it doesn't. But it can serve, I think, to help residents get from A to B without having to navigate the rotaries every single time. So in terms of the amount of funding, I believe one of the agreements as part of the special permit was a $250,000 commitment from the developer. So this basically just is a front loading of that, and at the time that they get their building permit, this will be built into that. Is that how? Can you explain how that works?
Mr. Barr?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So at this point, as you noted, Vice Mayor, there's a strong desire to at least investigate this further and figure out, the right design and how we make sure this is a connection that serves the neighborhood and doesn't become just another sink for traffic. I think that at this point, between the design and further study, further planning and design and construction, if we actually choose to build this extension of Terminal Road, it would be significantly more than $250,000. So I think we view this $50,000 as a way to get the ball rolling now while we're waiting for the funds to be available from the developer mitigation. So I don't know that it's so much that we would, the $50,000 would come back to us, but rather that eventually we're going to wind up spending, if we move this forward, more than that. And so this is just part of the city's commitment to make sure this happens, having heard from the neighborhood and local residents about how important they feel this could be to addressing the type of traffic circulation issues you mentioned.
Okay. Great. Thank you. I'm excited that this is moving forward and think it will help. So then one of the other three items in this has to do with quick build projects for separated bike lanes. So we'll be talking about the cycling safety ordinance eventually, which are permanent bike lanes, but that we still want to keep doing the quick build. So can you talk a little bit about which streets might be identified for quick build?
Sure. Through Mr. Mayor. So the two streets that we're most focused on for this year are Mount Auburn Street from roughly JFK Street to Putnam. That was repaved last year, and we've been sort of put in some temporary markings, which made some minor improvements to the bicycle facilities and the operation of the street. But we want to look more closely at that, both in terms of cycling facilities, but also tour bus issues and pedestrian safety and bus mobility as well, since the number one bus, runs along that part of that stretch. So I think, that's one of our key focuses. And then the other is the area around Porter Square, which I know the council has heard from a number of constituents about, and we're finishing up some improvements there. And I'll take this opportunity just to note that not all of the pavement markings are in yet, and that's why some of the conditions that people have been asking about exist. And we do feel that there'll be some further improvements now that the weather is getting warm enough to do that painting to help address some of those concerns. But during the planning for those current improvements, we heard a strong message from the community about wanting to see a look at fully protected bike lanes, in the Porter Square area, which for the purposes of this study, we're defining as Beach Street to Roseland. And so we'll be looking at that stretch as well as I suppose the little stub of Somerville Ave that's in Cambridge, heading into Porter Square in more detail using these funds.
Thanks. Would Webster be under consideration? I don't know if you're ready to talk about that, but we did have that policy order that asked you to look at that. And I know that the other section of Webster is going to be completely reconstructed, but it ends at Hampshire Street. At Cambridge Street, sorry. So it's the part that goes from Cambridge Street over towards Somerville that's very small, but still significant.
Yes.
Is that a candidate for a potential quick build intervention?
So I guess, and we are working on a response to that question. And I guess the two things I'd say, one is it's a relatively short stretch. So in terms of funding, it doesn't, it's not necessarily something that we needed a big pot of funding like we've asked for these two projects. It's less than 500 feet from the Somerville border to Cambridge Street, which is where Webster ends for that segment of it. And I guess we'll be, like I said, we'll be filing the response to that soon. I would say we do have some concerns about how that will work operationally, but we certainly understand that there's a strong desire to see better connections from what Somerville has put in to Cambridge Street and then beyond.
Okay, thank you. And then just going back to Mount Auburn Street, there was a proposal with the Better Bus Project to have a slight change to the number 1 bus route and have it turn left onto Dunster and then end up on Mount Auburn. Would that affect anything to do with this study, or is that just going to?
I mean, I guess through Mr. Mayor, it's a little hard to say, but certainly it would increase the segment or how much of this segment the bus uses. And so if we were looking at changes that were for buses, then it might change a little bit, but just thinking about the street and not having really put a whole lot of thought into this in advance, I don't see it being if it stays where it is or if it uses Dunster Street, I don't see it having a significant impact on the planning we would do. Again, I think the primary goal would be, the establishment of improved cycling facilities, and then if we can do things for other modes as well, then obviously we would. Again, the tour bus parking issues are challenging, particularly since they would interact a lot potentially with the better bicycle facilities. So I think no matter what, we'll have to address the tour bus issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Carlone, followed by Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Barr, the Vice Mayor covered many of the bicycle areas, but I wanted to focus again on Wheeler Street and Terminal Road. I was also involved with neighbors on that as an option. And it just seems to me that for the city to be designing Alewife with super blocks, and Wheeler Street is a super block, it's 800, 900, maybe more feet long, is a disaster from a transportation point of view, not having connective streets. And I agree, you don't want to create a shortcut that people take and flood the street anyway. So it has to be carefully thought out. But I would use this as a vehicle to say the whole area has to be carefully thought out. And the city plan that we saw months ago, we're hoping for an update, just perpetuates the superblocks approach. And frankly, that went out in the 1960s. So I'm hoping that we come up with a plan that has a network of streets, even if the city has to build them, that supports more residential development. That's what seems to be happening there from a developer point of view. And this connection, Terminal Road, is key to that, to beginning that. And I'm sure if the road goes in, you will figure out a way, whether it's a one-way system or whatever, even though typically that's frowned on, that there is a solution. Almost every successful area in the city has a tight network of streets, including Harvard Square, even including Central Square. So it seems crazy to me that we're considering to do something very different in Alewife as drawn. Even North Point added more roads as time went on. So I hope we take this as an indication that it's the beginning of a studied system for the area and not just one road, that one little road that might make a connection. And if I might add, if $250,000 isn't half of what this cost is, we should have asked for more from the developer. I can see 50-50 But if it's less than that, then we have to learn from this and be more aggressive. Thank you.
Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think we heard today that we will have built about 1 mile of protected bike lanes in this year, and our goal is 4 miles per year. So, can you give us a sense of going forward? Where else can we accelerate the creation of protected bike facilities?
Mr. Barr?
So through Mr. Mayor, do you want to? Yeah, I mean, I guess through Mr. Mayor, I know there's been discussions about 4 miles a year, but I don't know that that's a goal that we've ever articulated, at least from the administration side. That said, we do agree that we want to accelerate this as much as possible, and I think it's a little hard to say exactly where we'll go next, because I think we're still trying to get through the projects that I just mentioned, and as well as, there's a lot of other separated bicycle facilities that are being created through other means. So, for example, we had a meeting at the end of February about the Ames Street two-way cycle track that MIT is going to be building between now and a year from now, more or less. And there's other projects like that are happening as part of directly as part of developer mitigation. So I think it's a little hard to say. We all know about River Street, and then I think then the projects that are in the 5-year plan that will map onto the bicycle plan. We are about to undertake, and your community development's about to undertake a update to the bicycle plan. So I think that'll be probably the best venue to have the conversation about exactly what the longer term, meaning beyond this summer projects need to be moving forward. So I think, the biggest driver, I think, is where we see safety issues that we need to address. And obviously we see safety issues throughout the city, but we've tried to be as data-driven as we can be in terms of looking at locations with higher crash rates and then focusing our attention there, and or where we have an opportunity based on other work that's occurring.
Thanks. I guess I just encourage us to move as fast as we can. I spend a lot of time on Binney Street, and half of it is rational and the other half is not. And it would be great if we could rationalize the whole thing. Thank you.
Councilor Mallon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the city manager and Mr. Barr. I just wanted to go back to the Terminal Road conversation for a second and the study that we're going to be doing. What are we going to be looking at the Fresh Pond Mall piece of it by Apple Cinema? I just feel like right now, even without that connection, people speed through that mall trying to get to New Street. Is that going to be part of your study at all? A lot of parents are very concerned about their number of kids that walk from Danahy to Apple or over to McDonald's, and somebody is probably going to get hurt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't, acknowledging that is absolutely a concern that we share, and I think in general the act of driving through a parking lot, which might seem like not that big of a problem, it's actually one of the more dangerous things you can do, because people aren't expecting through traffic versus people who are just coming to park. So I think we do see that as a significant issue. This initial study is really intended to look kind of a little bit more generally at circulation and to the point that I think the Vice Mayor made. How do we provide this connection to these different destinations in a way that allows for local connectivity without attracting regional traffic that's trying to find its way around the Parkway and the Rotaries and the other issues that already exist. So I think as part of that, inevitably we will have a discussion about how people traverse safely and legally across the Fresh Pond Mall or Fresh Pond Shopping Center property. I don't know that we'll necessarily be at a point to get into specific designs of this is how we would actually route that, or what we would be able, how the street or a street-like thing through there would function. But I think, I just coined a new term, I guess.
I support the street-like thing.
The street-like thing. we have a lot of those in Cambridge, is, that's maybe one step further, but obviously if it's something that people are concerned about today, we can try to put a little bit more emphasis on at least making some recommendations about how we can address that in the short term, because as you point out, people already make that maneuver. It is concerning for a couple different reasons, and we do want to try to make sure that as we increase the connectivity of the network, we don't sort of have any unintended side effects that are not safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, that's exactly what I was hoping to get to, is the unintended consequence of creating more connectivity and creating a more safe environment on the other end. I do want to just voice my support for something that the Vice Mayor said earlier around Webster Street. If we can look at Webster Street as a real area of quick build, I think to have that Somerville piece be done and then just have this small piece of the portion of Webster Street that's in Cambridge not have a protected bike lane, I think is a miss. So I would like to throw my support for doing that. So thank you.
Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. To bring it back to Porter Square, it seems to work really well now. And I think it illustrates one of the challenges we face in implementing infrastructure, which is if you can't do it all at once, you may have some people hanging out there in troublesome circumstances for a while, which was Porter Square when it wasn't, and it's still not entirely striped because it hasn't been great striping weather. So if you're in the left-hand turn as a cyclist waiting to make a left-hand turn and a driver makes a left-hand turn from the center lane, it is a terrifying experience. And I wind up there periodically. The signaling, though, is working really well, I think, in having the people, if you take the jug handle for whatever reason, that seems to work exactly at the same timing as if you'd stayed in the left lane. And I don't have a good solution. I just wanted to acknowledge that it must be difficult for you with all these moving pieces to put something down that might seem like a backward step, and then as the striping comes or this and that happens, it moves forward. I think right now it's working, especially when that center lane gets striped. I think, at least from a cyclist perspective, it should work really, really well there.
Okay. I would just say real quickly, maybe regarding the Fresh Pond Mall and the parking lot. This is an issue that has been talked about years and years and years, and it's private property, and the owner has not been the most cooperative historically. So, Councillor Mallon, maybe you, myself, and the Vice Mayor, because I actually had a policy order in 6 years ago about the Fresh Pond Mall and making that parking lot safer. Maybe we should strategize a little bit, because there are some things that we need the owner to cooperate with us, and that has not been the case for decades. Mr. Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are currently working on a way to have a discussion with the owner, so hopefully we can accomplish that.
Okay. And maybe it's a new owner, same family, maybe there's a different willingness. Okay. So roll call.
Councilor Carlone?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly? Councilor Mallon?
Yes.
Councilor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Councilor Simmons? Councilor Toomey?
Yes.
Councilor Zondervan?
Yes.
Mayor McGovern?
Yes.
And agenda item number 6 is adopted on the affirmative vote with 8 in favor, 1 recorded as absent.
We now move to City Manager Agenda Item Number 7, a communication transmitted from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to a waiting report item number 18-94 regarding a report on micromobility, shared mobility data access, and data management concerns. This was pulled by Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your memo from Community Development and from the Traffic, Parking, and Transportations, it mentions a consultant's work is expected to be completed next year. Who is the consultant? I don't know why you don't mention consultant names. Maybe there's a good reason that I can't think of, but when I won't ask that question, but yes, I will. Who is the consultant?
Mr. Asmussen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the lead consultant is Arcadis. And the key sub-consultant is Sam Schwartz, which is primarily a transportation planning firm.
Okay. You mention a number of, in the second paragraph down, the major paragraph down, you mentioned NACTO's guidelines. That is the national standard, is it not? Isn't it perceived as the national standard?
I think you could say that. We certainly follow their guidelines on a whole variety of transportation-related topics. So in the way that we do transportation planning, we perceive them as providing the standard.
Yes, I would agree with that. That's why I was asking. I assume that. So perhaps when you do present this, you can also just give us a quick overview of how it relates to NACTO. So it isn't, this is what the consultants in the city came up. This is based on code and all the research that's been done in the last 20 years. And finally, I was thinking about blue bikes. Do blue bikes give us data?
Yes, lots and lots of data. Since, again, Blue Bikes is owned by us, so everything about the system is ours, and so all the data is something that we have access to. And it has also in the past been put out for public consumption. Well, everything, it's always available, but encouragement for people to use the data and do interesting analysis with it. So very active data source.
So ironically, we might have more information on bicycle use, percentage-wise, than on cars, or but scooters will give us data too, will they not?
The intention is that the program design will be such that data sharing will be part of that. There's a limit to how much data is typically provided, but we're working with our neighboring communities on all aspects of the scooter program design that we expect to launch this summer if the state law is changed, to make sure that we all ask for similar things and therefore have a better chance of having uniform data across the region, because we know the scooters will be used not just in Cambridge but in all our neighboring communities.
Well, this sounds like it would be very exciting to learn a great deal, and thank you. We look forward to this.
Vice Mayor Devereux?
Thank you. This was a really interesting memo. I did click on those links, and it's fascinating that sort of a sub-industry has grown up of platforms to help cities manage data from all of these different things. I mean, that's kind of inconceivable probably from a planning standpoint even 10 or 15 years ago. So it's really sophisticated stuff. The comment about the Blue Bikes data being ours is great, but it sort of raises the question in my mind. Obviously, scooters are as much for the companies a data play as they are a mobility play. Is there no thought that cities would want to be able to have the data control that we have with our bike share systems, and therefore have, the same equivalent with a municipally owned and controlled and managed scooter system? Is that not? I haven't seen that model happening, in what I've been reading, but is that not a possibility?
Are you asking whether we could have a municipally controlled scooter system as opposed to working with one of the companies?
Yes.
I would say that it's possible. Ideally, we would have a system that is operated in a similar way across communities, and I don't believe that there's interest in the other communities to have their own system. I think from what we've heard in conversations, our neighboring communities are looking to authorize the private companies that are now in the field. And so it would be challenging to have a different system that is operated in an entirely different way.
No, I see that. I mean, but how did the Blue Bike system come about? Because that takes the participation of 4 cities deciding it was better for them to do something, as a group rather than everybody.
So at the time, it's a number of years ago now that BikeShare was launched in the region, and that was the way that it was done. It wasn't done in the way that the scooter companies are now proposing to operate. So if we wanted to have BikeShare, that was the way to do it, and that's how it was launched. It is a considerable operation to run the system on our own compared to permitting a company that is more turnkey.
Oh, I recognize that. I mean, I'm assuming that it would be in the same model as we have an operator like Motivate, so we aren't sending city trucks out to rebalance bikes and repair bikes. We're contracting with someone to do that, but at the same time, we do control how these scooters. I realize you can't. This is a hypothetical question. It just strikes me that the data is really so important that leaving it to the market puts us again in the position where we don't have the control that we deserve.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could add one thing. I mean, despite the work that Motivate does with the Blue Bike system, despite that on the staff side, it is a considerable endeavor regardless, and a lot of staff time does get spent on it on an ongoing basis ever since its inception. A little less now that it's more, that we're more used to it, but a lot more in the early years. One other thing to think of is the trade-off between having a system that we own, which gives us a lot of control, and then the ability to be nimble, which is a discussion that came up, you might recall, when we were talking about dockless bikes. So once we create a system and we own it, we do have the data access, but we might be more often than not locking ourselves into some sort of contractual agreement that might limit our ability to make changes as new technology or new options emerge in the market. So as a city, as a council, we have to be sure that that's a trade-off that we are comfortable with as well if we choose to go that route.
And I would add, it's not a question of no data. And there already are data agreements in place in many communities right now, and from conversations we've had with other cities, there's sufficient data to understand a lot about how the system operates and whether new additional scooters are needed or not, and generally what kind of origins and destinations within bounds of privacy. So I don't think we're not looking at a situation where we wouldn't have access to any data. It's just not necessarily like 100%. And probably whereas with Blue Bikes we have more control over how that data is shared. I think that's more of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a point of debate in terms of all of the privacy concerns too, how much we trust the vendors. So I don't want to get too far down the data path. It's a fascinating and obviously fast evolving segment, and I look forward to seeing this blueprint when it is developed. Thank you.
I have Councillor Kelly, the Councillor Zondervan.
Thank you. I'd love to go further down the data path. Well, it's kind of creepy because if I want, and I don't know exactly who has access to my data, but I can go back 5 years and see that I took a Blue Bike from whatever Hubway stop to some other Hubway stop, and it took me X many minutes to get from point A to point B. And at some point, I just think that data needs to be scrubbed. The fact that, and it's a larger discussion about what we did with data in general, and I understand we're moving to constant contact, and that creates data in email management. So there's all sorts of data collection standpoints, but I'm a little bit troubled that however far back I've been using this stuff, the data is still there for whoever accesses it down the line. And as our policies change or as systems get hacked or whatever, I don't think we place enough value on scrubbing out data. So I appreciate it's an ongoing discussion, and this isn't necessarily a place to have it in much detail. It wasn't clear to me. It doesn't seem like this is addressing the Brookline scooter pilot program, and I just wanted to clarify that that's not on the table right now. It's not. Okay, so this is just about the data stuff. Okay, I think we're going to wind up having to look deeper into how we collect data, and I appreciate the fact that you're looking at experts with Barry and all these other places and the folks that are running platforms on that and so forth. It's not a great answer, but I'm a little bit troubled by how much of me is out there on our Hubway system. Thank you.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I want to agree with my colleagues on that. I've actually had to implement data systems myself that are HIPAA compliant, which is pretty much the strictest standard that we have in the U.S. And I think we need to be thinking about similar types of guidelines for how we manage our data to protect our privacy. And then we really need to look at these questions that the Vice Mayor is asking about, these trade-offs that we're making with giving private companies control over that data. I realize that we can do some protection through our agreements, but ultimately we are better off having full control over that. So, I agree with Councilor Kelly that we do need to do a deeper dive into this question as we move forward with these technologies. Thank you.
Anything further? The question comes on placing the matter on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to City Manager Agenda Item Number 8, communication transmitted from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to awaiting report item number 19-17 regarding a report on an update on efforts to study, assess, and address noise issues associated with flights in and out of Logan Airport. This was pulled by the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Through you. Airplane noise, everyone's favorite subject. I was happy to see this on the agenda because since we had the policy orders at the beginning of this year, we continue to get a lot of complaints about airplane noise and what we can do, and it's one of those really frustrating situations for local officials to keep saying, it's some higher agency, it's the FAA, it's Massport, it's the state. Don't call us. We can't really do anything about it. We're trying. It just feels really frustrating to be in the position of the sort of front line of friends and neighbors complaining about this endlessly, and it is really, really disruptive as someone who lives under one of these flight paths. So I gather that the memo says there's this meeting on April 23rd at 4, which is of the CAC, the Community Advisory Committee. So that's Bill Degnan, right? We'll attend that on our behalf. The public can attend that. And then it mentions there will be 33L working group communities, including elected officials. I don't know as much about that process. Is that some of the elected officials who are on the airplane noise? It has a name, I've forgotten. Caucus? No? Who is that group and which elected officials participate in that?
So this is not a group. What this is indicating is that MIT researchers are prepared to give a presentation to representatives of the 33L communities. So in our case, it would be Bill Degnan plus any elected officials that are interested in participating. So we expect this to be a single meeting that would bring together all the 33L communities for one presentation.
I see. So it would be scheduled jointly?
Yes.
It wouldn't be a series of meetings, one in Cambridge, one in...
One meeting.
One meeting, okay.
Is
So,
how it stands at the moment.
okay, and you will let us know when
Yes.
that is so that if we don't have another committee meeting, we can attend?
Yes, and also I'll just pull a plug in for our new newsletter. So we've created an airport noise newsletter that you can, and online that you can subscribe to provide all this information as it rolls out. So anyone who signs up for that will get all updates that we have that pertains to airplane noise.
Okay, and where do we find that sign up? Is that on that page of all the different alert signups?
Yes, yep.
Okay. And then finally, the memo mentions that we'll be funding a noise consultant in the fiscal year 20 budget, which is good news.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you think that consultant's
So
scope will be?
the two main scopes of work we anticipate that the consultant will work on is, first off, as it relates to airplane noise. We don't know exactly what we may need, but once the MIT information comes out, and we may need to have technical support in helping understand and reaching a collective decision with the other 33L communities, which is what is going to be challenging and needed, because they will want to move forward once they have sign-off that the 33L communities agree on a solution. So that would be one area of work, and the other relates to the I-90 Alston Interchange project, which is undergoing redesign right now, and we expect there to be questions that we would want to ask in terms of what is the best noise mitigation strategy for various segments of that project.
Great. I think that's a great step, so happy to hear that. Thank you.
Pleasure of the council. Councilor Zondervan.
I just want to add that I actually noticed the airplane noise myself in the eastern part of the city, which we don't get as many complaints from this weekend. It was really quite noticeable. So please keep us in the loop and anything we can do to help. Thanks.
Pleasure of the council. On placing the matter on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to City Manager Agenda Item Number 9, a communication transmitted from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to a waiting report Item Number 19-27, regarding a report on an update on the firehouse improvements allocation, pulled by Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the City Manager and Chief Mahoney, I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you to the City Manager and to the City leadership for taking this issue that we brought up last June seriously. Some of our firehouses needed some significant upgrades to both the living quarters and the eating quarters. And I really do feel like with this allocation and with these plans, I feel like you heard us and really put together a really amazing plan. I'm looking at over $35 million in funding over the next couple of years to really address some of these issues. So I just wanted to make sure. So the $2 million that we allocated last June went into these, what's called the improvement projects, right? The 13 improvement projects, which are things like new mattresses, new split AC systems, gear extractors, water dispensers, plumbing fixtures and stuff. And the rest of it is under the larger funding allocations. So upgrades to Taylor Square renovation and headquarters. East Cambridge is getting a new HVAC system, which I think everybody remembers last summer was kind of a disaster, a nightmare during a really, really hot period of time. And there's going to be a deep cleaning pilot program. So am I understanding that correctly, that the $2 million from last year was the sort of improvements project and the rest are a capital expenditure?
Generally, that's true to you, Mr. Mayor. The fire department also has a repair and maintenance budget also that they've used some funds to also augment what we provided in terms of the $2 million. And then we also plan on using the $2 million, as we said, to do the pilot program for the deep cleaning, and then roll that out to the other fire stations once we get done with River Street. And then we've also hired a house doctor to do an evaluation of our fire stations, but also do a pilot program at River Street to basically do some of the basic systems in terms of flooring and ceiling repair and paint repair and et cetera, and then basically make that a model and then see how we can roll that out to the other fire stations once we understand what that will undertake.
Great. One of the things that I think was just sort of a small thing in here, but I really wanted to highlight it is one of the things I worry about is occupational cancer for our firefighters and first responders. And there's an item in here that's important, but didn't get a lot of explanation. The city's hired an architectural firm with experience with firehouses to establish standards for interior upgrades, including, most importantly, isolating the laundry and gear storage areas, as well as apparatus bays. So because modern building creates toxic fumes when burned, firefighters go back with a lot of carcinogens all over their gear, and it's really important to keep that gear isolated, go right into the laundry, and keep making sure that our bays are being exhausted out, because what's left behind on turnout gear after a fire is a lot of carcinogens and can be a silent killer later. Firefighters have a 14% higher rate of dying from cancer than the general population. So I think this is a really critical piece, making sure that we're spending the money to make sure that our firefighters are as healthy as they can be. So that's just something I wanted to call out and really say thank you to the city leadership and to the fire chief and to everybody involved in really making this a priority and really spending the money where we need to. So thanks.
Pleasure of the council. Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we first introduced Envision, now 5+ years ago, part of that was to have each of the departments do an overall, ideally we were told this was going to happen, that each department would look at their needs and put it forth. Is there a master plan or a program plan document for the fire department?
Mr. Manager?
Or is it as we need, we fix up buildings like we're doing now?
We clearly have a plan to renovate the buildings that we have in terms of just pay as you go and then a bonding schedule of what's going to be the next buildings. In terms of looking at locations for potential new fire stations, they're in discussion. There is no plan. And if you put a station somewhere and we're in discussion, could that mean you could take out a station somewhere? But there's no plan to say what's the next new station in terms of a station we don't have. There's discussions, but there clearly is a plan that says after we do this building, what would be the next one? But I think the big thing is also to say that, this is a start. It's great. But, next year we'll definitely be coming up with another $1 million something appropriation to keep this going. And then we'll work with the chief and Public Works to figure out after we do this next building, what would be the next fire station that we take on.
Well, I would just say that if the Envision plan in many of our minds was exactly what it was, what are the needs for the city, at least establishing the needs of a station near Kendall Square. I personally believe, and I think some of the councilors, if not all, concur, one out in Alewife, and maybe not in the long term maintaining some of the smaller stations, one that's going to receive money in the short term. And I was just asking if indeed, we've talked about DPW, talked about fire, and we know there are other things that have to be put on the table, or frankly, they're going to be forgotten, like the proposed Fulkerson Eversource site, and, they spring up. I think it would be to everybody's benefit, I'm including everybody at the front table, including us, to know what those are. If we can't get a station near Kendall, maybe it should be in Kendall. There are only a few sites left, and the same with the Eversource site. Get it out of the neighborhood. So I'm just raising it for that reason, because I totally agree we have to upgrade. And I thank the counselor for pushing this last year. But if we don't put it on paper, it's likely not going to happen. I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
I guess I'll
Chief?
start and then I'll turn it
Mr.
over
Manager.
to the chief for you, Mr. Mayor. I don't disagree, and I think we're having these discussions. I think we've not come to specific conclusions on where those might be, to be very honest. But I do know that we will continue to look at opportunities in Alewife and Kendall and East Cambridge potentially to address a lot of the city needs. So we are constantly meeting on that. Ms. Peterson has been really leading a group of people who meet regularly to see what are our needs, what's going on, and we will continue to do that. That is one of the benefits to have the free cash position that we're in. If we find something that we feel we need to strike, even if we don't have to put the building up immediately, we can purchase the land and then come up with a game plan on how and when we would do that. So I will let the chief speak more about the fire department, but I agree, and it is something that we meet actually pretty regularly on to say, where can we go, what's out there, and what would be our next steps for both fire, public works, and primarily a lot of city departments that no longer have space. We need to find more space for a lot of operations right now.
Chief?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we've worked very closely with the manager's office and Public Works and Mr. Kale in trying to put together a game plan, if you will, to address these issues. One of the challenges we face is that, you know, if you're going to do major work in a fire station, we have to relocate the personnel, relocate the apparatus, the equipment. That's a huge challenge. We are moving forward with the Taylor Square project. That has been, there have been some delays in that are not of the making of anybody in the city. It's because of a challenge with getting the equipment to the trailers, the temporary living facilities. That's kind of pushed the timetable on us a little bit, but we're pretty certain right now that we've got things in sight. You know, this is something that my staff and myself, we look at on a near daily basis as far as the challenges of what needs to be done. These are very old buildings. I sound like a broken record. You've heard me say it here many times. 4 of them built in the 19th century. This is an old city. It's a congested, built-up city. So we're trying to formulate a game plan for, you know, what we're going to do, because it's a very interlocking puzzle, if you will, that, you know, if you move part A, now you got to do something with parts B and C. So that's the challenge we face. I want to thank the entire City Council as well as the manager's office for the infusion of cash over the past year to address some of these real glaring issues, and been very, very fortunate to have Ms. Lynch work with us from Public Works, Owen O'Riordan, to put together a game plan moving forward. But it's going to, these problems didn't arise overnight, and I think we're doing the very best we can to face them and correct them as we go forward.
Mr. Mayor, one last comment. The Envision document, when it is produced, absolutely has to list the city's needs, even if they're conceptual, at least out 20 years, what we think those needs are, or we're working in the dark. I realize you're not, but we are, and the public is. And if people know what's needed, they're more apt to consider it to be true instead of hearing about, I'm not talking about present projects. They're all existing stations. But any additional ones, they're more apt to accept it, knowing that we need this, and here's the logical 3 locations. And I think it will have a major effect on the budget, understanding what the budget is and where it needs to end up over a period of time. Without it, Envision is not Envision. It's only looking at silos. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Zondervan? And just a reminder, we are talking about the allocations to the firehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the allocation to the firehouse is great. I do want to second Councilor Carlone's request that we do more planning ahead. These are old buildings, as you say, and that's not a surprise, right? We've known that for a long time, so we should be able to anticipate better what is needed going forward. In terms of our electrical infrastructure, for example, we know that we need to electrify pretty much everything we do. So that's going to require a lot more electrical infrastructure. Where does all that go? We should be thinking ahead about those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank you when Councilor Mallon and I brought the order in asking for the $2 million. I think we both knew that there are obviously larger, longer term needs that need to be addressed, but there were certainly some immediate needs just to ensure that our firefighters are safe and comfortable and supported. I will say this moving forward. I don't know. I know you meet regularly to talk about the long-term plan, but I also want to make sure that any short-term fixes, it shouldn't have taken 2 city councilors to tour firehouses to say, hey, there are mattresses with springs sticking out of them. So let's just make sure that, we are really communicating with our firefighters, and if there are any immediate things that we need to do to improve the firehouses, because it's going to take a while to replace them or rebuild them or whatever we have to do, then we need to do that. And I just, I would rather that know that someone's watching that and making that happen rather than, relying on others.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not being critical of anybody because I was the finance director at the time, but clearly over the last 15, 20 years, we've spent a lot of money on equipment and on training, and we've made that a priority. And these areas were just let go longer than they should have, and we now recognize that, and we're putting a plan that will still continue to do what we need for equipment and training and all of that, but making sure that we resolve this problem as well. And I appreciate all the work the council's done on this, and I assure you we will stay on top of this from here moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that. The question comes on placing the matter on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. We now move to the calendar. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Zondervan.
Charter right 1.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
May I pull unfinished business number 5, please?
Okay. I think that's all we can address right now. We now move back to Charter Right number 1. An application was received from Gregory Matozian requesting permission for a curb cut at the premises numbered 14 Jackson Street. Said petition has received approval from Inspectional Services, Traffic, Parking, and Transportation, Historical Commission, and Public Works. Response has been received from the Neighborhood Association. I believe we have to also move suspension to bring forward communication and reports from other city officers, number 1. On suspension, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. On bringing forward communications from other city officers, number 1. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Both are in front of us. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a chance to meet with the proponents, and I'm satisfied that they are doing what they promised. So I move the question.
So, right. Right. So we refer communication report on referring communication from other city officers to charter right number 1. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to unfinished business number 5. A communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis J. Carlone and Councilor Craig A. Kelly, co-chairs of the Ordinance Committee, for a public hearing held on February 27, 2019, to discuss a proposed amendment to the municipal code in Title 12 entitled Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places by adding a new Chapter 12.22 entitled Cycling Safety Ordinance. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pulled this, but I would like to give you the opportunity to say a few words first, if you would like. I know that it's hard sometimes sitting in the mayor's chair because you can't get first words, so I defer to you. I do have a few things I'd like to say, but if there's anything you'd like to say first.
Sure, thank you. I would just like to say thank you to everyone who worked on this. There were numerous conversations back and forth between the city and the bike safety community, as well as our office and city councilors, vice mayor, yourself included, to draft something that not only addressed the concerns of the bike community around safety, but also some of the concerns that the city had. And it was a collaborative effort. So I just want to express my appreciation. Thank you also to my chief of staff. This was a lot of work, and I think it is I was going to say groundbreaking, but I don't know if that's a pun or not, ordinance that really, I think, makes it clear that the city is moving forward with safe infrastructure for all modes of transportation. So that's all I have now. We'll see where the conversation leads. But thank you, Vice Mayor, and I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you. And, excuse me?
Vice Mayor pulled, and she yielded to me, so I'm going to go to her, and I'll call Councilor Toomey, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Groundbreaking, yes. I think at least one online publication referred to it as historic, which is certainly nice, perhaps a little bit hyperbolic, I don't know. And I suppose that the first paved sidewalks may have been considered historic too when they were invented. So I think, adopting the cycling safety ordinance isn't about making headlines or even about inspiring more Cambridge envy among certain Boston residents. It's about making the safety of all road users our highest priority. So now that a significant number of people, myself included, are biking, and many more have said in surveys that they would bike if it were safer, and after several tragic fatalities recently in places that were, literally crying out for separated facilities, we're now acknowledging that we've got work to do in changing the cultural norms and reallocating the space on our public way. So adopting this ordinance is really a first and small step, and as many have noted, it's not going to yield a complete protected network right away. And we do urgently need that network to protect our family, our friends, our neighbors, students, workers of all ages who are biking, and those who say they would if they could rely on a protected network to connect them to the key destinations around the city and to other destinations in the region. So this is very much a regional effort that we're making. So tonight I'm celebrating with all of you and our bike advocates who, the commitment of the city officials, the city manager and staff, the mayor's office, and all of the safety advocates that helped to produce this ordinance. It was a lot of hard work, as the mayor said, and it's no small achievement. Tomorrow I'll be back to stand with the road safety advocates to press for more of those quick build bike lane improvements, more enforcement of the traffic rules, and more education. And so, as one person had said, it's not only about the bike infrastructure or about infrastructure in general. But without that infrastructure, we're not doing our duty to protect the public. So thank you. I appreciate my colleagues supporting this.
Councilor Toomey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I certainly appreciate all the efforts that everyone involved in drafting this cycling safety ordinance, or repeat cycling safety ordinance put into this. But I cannot support this ordinance. Again, it's titled Cycling Safety Ordinance without any mention of the word proper use of lighting at night and to encourage the use of helmets by everyone. So I will be voting present on this. I just find it somewhat disturbing. You know, this is called cycling safety, but there's no mention anywhere about the safety of the cyclist, especially to encourage, at least to encourage. You know, I tried before to do a voluntary registration that was defeated in the council, which is fine, but even to encourage people to use proper helmets and lighting at night. And, you know, it's called the cycling safety. And to me, it just seems a little bit ironic. So I will vote present on this. But I do appreciate the work people put into this, but I will vote present. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Zondervan, followed by Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm excited, and I hope we'll adopt this ordinance tonight. I first began meeting with advocates from the Cambridge Bicycle Safety about this proposal more than a year ago, and I'm very proud of the work that they, along with you, Mr. Mayor, and the Vice Mayor have done to this point, as well as with my other colleagues. It's a very important step. It's not going to be the final step, as has been said. And ultimately, we will have to be willing to trade off car storage for protected bike lanes along some of our corridors if we are to complete the bicycle network. So I look forward to having those conversations and continuing to build on the great work this council has done to make Cambridge a leader in bicycle safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo my colleagues on this and thank the Vice Mayor and the Mayor for their leadership in pushing this forward. I think this ordinance is an example of sustained advocacy and committed engagement. I think from what we've heard, not only on this discussion, but discussions related to firehouses and many other issues, it's very imperative that we not only be responsive but proactive when we build equitable policy infrastructure. So I'm excited about this, and I will say on the lights issue, I think the city has done a good job of having events where there's a lot of bike light installations. In 2018, there were over 140 bikes with new lights. We have many events like that. I think we can definitely do more and make a more concerted effort, not only as we build out more bike lanes, but think about how we're getting these resources to as many people as possible. So I'm committed to, I think it's not an either or, it's a and I look forward to having that discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councilor Carlone and then Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as bike safety goes, I believe the state requires lights. And as far as a helmet goes, it's ludicrous if that's not required. We require seatbelts in cars and lights on cars for safety reasons. So there's no reason why that can't move forward. As far as the overall goal of the ordinance, I've said it before, this is basic urban design 101. You separate movement zones in a protective way. And to me, that means raised curbs. It means walkways that it's easy to get out of the car and not step into a bike zone, which is just a painted line. It means you plant out the areas that you can plant out and make it more attractive. It's just an integrated part of the overall city, and this kind of approach was done in the 1860s in public parks and was considered radical then. It's kind of humorous that this is considered radical now by Cambridge being the only city in the local area that's doing this. So again, this is common sense, and I'm glad we've come to that point. Thanks.
Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. I'm supportive of this ordinance. I sort of agree with Councillor Toomey that there are lots of things that go into bike safety, and this is one of them, but certainly cyclists following the laws is another one. Having lights at night, and I am no paragon, by the way, of cyclists following the laws in many ways. But nonetheless, I think it's something that the police need to do a more aggressive job. But we do a lot of self-inflicted injury stuff when it comes to our infrastructure. So if you were to bike down Inman Street, just on the other side of the council, you'll see that the city has done or maybe it wasn't the city, but certainly the city allowed some sort of trenching that puts a cyclist either adjacent to the door or in the middle of the traffic. And it happens all the time in my conversations with DPW, or it's very difficult to get street work done in a way that doesn't impact the bike lane or the bike place, even if it's not a lane, if it's not a complete reconstruction. So we have a whole host of places where there's just no good pavement where a cyclist should go. And these are things that I think, need to start spending more of our energy focusing on, as well as building infrastructure. But we are aggressively making some streets more dangerous for cyclists simply by the way we allow road work to be done. And I'm not sure why we continue to do that, and I'll continue to argue that it's the wrong thing to do, even if the projects become more expensive to keep them safe. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just add, before I finish up, that I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for other people. You're certainly not going to get an argument from me that, we need to do more to educate people around safety, and certainly I would encourage folks to have lights and helmets and all of those things. This ordinance is really around infrastructure, and as I've said before, we have drivers who run traffic signals, yet we don't say we shouldn't have traffic signals because some people don't follow the rules. So yes, there are some cyclists who don't follow the rules. That is true, and I wish that weren't the case. But that doesn't mean we don't move forward with providing safe infrastructure, to do as much as we can to make sure people are safe. Ultimately, it's an individual responsibility. And I think we should certainly do as much as we can to educate people, but we need to provide the infrastructure to ensure that safety is there. And that's what this ordinance is about. Councilor Mellon, I didn't see did you put your hand up?
I did not.
Oh.
I can say a few words. I feel like we adopted this the last time it was in front of us, so it's a little anticlimactic for me. But I do think this is really exciting. I do want to thank all the bicycle advocates and for the mayor's office and the city manager's office for putting so much time and energy into something that I think is important. It's an important step for the city to say we are committed to safer bike infrastructure in the future. I don't want us to take our eyes off the ball and having expended a lot of energy doing that, not be doing some of these quick builds, and where we really need to be putting in some safer infrastructure sooner than road reconstruction is scheduled to happen. If you look at our 5-year reconstruction plan of our streets and sidewalks, they don't actually align with the bike plan. So I'm really excited this is happening. I hope that we keep our commitment and focus to protect our cyclists going forward.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to briefly address a couple of comments on the road work. I completely agree with Councilor Kelly, and it strikes me that a lot of the road space is taken up by car storage. And so by having less car storage, we would have more space for bicyclists to find safety. during road work. And also by building out our network, we would have multiple paths for cyclists to get from A to B. And so if one road needs work, they would have other routes that are equally safe. So I think we can get there through this ordinance. Eventually, I agree with Councillor Mallon that we have to be even more aggressive than what's in the ordinance in terms of the quick builds. And on the helmets, it's a very controversial subject, and we don't want to get into it. I religiously wear a helmet myself, but there is a school of thought that says bicycling should be so safe that people shouldn't feel compelled that they have to wear a helmet to participate. And I will note that we don't require car drivers to wear helmets either. So I think that there is some irony there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably a longer conversation. There's cars have seat belts, and if I got on a bike, I would fall off. It might not. No one would have to hit me. I could fall off and bang my head. So that's a longer conversation. But before we vote, I do want to. We've thanked the city manager a lot, but I do want to do a special call out because this is an example of the city manager being willing to move in a direction that maybe he wasn't as willing to move in earlier on, and he listened and he talked to people and has really been an advocate for this moving forward. So I want to thank him for that. So if there's nothing further, we need a roll call, Madam Clerk.
On passage to be ordained, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Yes.
Councilor Kelly.
Yes.
Councilor Mallon.
Yes.
Councilor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Councilor Simmons. Councilor Toomey.
Present.
Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Mayor McGovern.
Yes.
And the proposed amendment to the municipal code is passed to be ordained on an affirmative vote with 7 in favor, 1 recorded as absent, and 1 recorded as present.
Thank you. We now move to applications and petitions. Pleasure of the council. On adoption of 1 and 2, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to communications on a motion by Councilor Mallon to bring forward communications 1 through 20 and place on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to resolutions on a motion by Vice Mayor. On a motion by Vice Mayor Devereaux to bring resolutions before us for adoption, making unanimous upon adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is anyone looking to pull a resolution? No? No? So on adoption of 1 through 11, making unanimous upon adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy orders on a motion by Councilor Simmons to bring the policy order and resolution list before us for discussion and adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Councilor Kelly.
Number 16, please.
16. Pleasure of the council. Councilor Carlone.
Chair, number 4.
Oh, hold on, I got Councilor Carlone.
Number 13, please.
13. Councilor Simmons.
4, please.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Mallon.
for 12, please.
12. Councilor Siddiqui.
2, 5, and 18.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Zondervan.
1, 7, 11, and 14.
11, 14, and 1. Pleasure of Vice Mayor.
Oh, well,
Why not?
Why not? I'll pull number 9, please. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, on the balance. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move back to policy order number 1, that the city manager is requested to instruct the Director of Traffic, Parking, and Transportation Department to install more metered parking spots in business districts that do not currently have any and report back to the City Council on this matter in a timely manner. It was pulled, this was filed by Councilor Toomey, pulled by Councilor Zondervan. I will go to the motion maker first if you'd like to speak. Or you want to yield to Councilor Zondervan?
I'll yield to, just very briefly, there's been a lot of new business just created in the city. I was just curious, some have parking meters, some don't have parking meters. I'm just looking to see where we could install to help some of the small businesses.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly appreciate the spirit of this policy order and the desire to help small businesses. I don't support adding more on-street parking. In fact, I want to reduce the amount of on-street parking, so I'm not in favor of this policy.
Further discussion? On adoption? Oh, are you? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Carlo.
Sorry, a little slow on the uptake. I don't understand the last councilor's comments. I understand the goal to reduce cars in general, but small-scale retail requires the success is directly related to having access to metered parking. We're not talking about excessive metered parking. We're not, as I understand it, we're not talking about parking lots. We're talking about existing street parking and putting meters there. And please correct me if I have the wrong impression, but that is about as basic as you can be if the city has cars in it. So as I understand it, I will be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
I've got Vice Mayor Devereaux and then Councilor Simmons.
Thank you.
I certainly think that if there are business districts that are having trouble with turnover for lack of meters, it's a way to consider how to do that. There are business districts that I'm familiar with that do not have meters, that don't have problems with turnover, that allow non-residents to park, with 2-hour parking or half-hour parking. And so, I think it's always, I'm sure that the parking department, because revenue is important to them, looks at meter utilization and street utilization, and I'm hoping that they are keeping tabs on this and being proactive when they hear from merchants and residents that there are turnover problems. But I don't want to go out with a predetermined conclusion that meters are the right things to do, because there's other ways to try to encourage turnover. Thank you.
Councilor Simmons.
Thank you. I concur with my colleague, Councilor Cardone. I think there's a value on metered parking for a couple of reasons. It's an inducement not to overstay, which sometimes happens in business districts where there are no meters. And the idea of some small additional revenue, we're not going to get rich on parking meters, is certainly, well, say an added benefit. But I listened to the conversations in the council, and it seems to me that when it comes to the business districts and small businesses in particular, we don't give them the same amount of care and attention. Councilor Siddiqui has done yeoman's work in the Economic Development Subcommittee, but it does not come up as often as I think it should. And sometimes our policies, practices, and procedures, I'm sure it's not done deliberately, does have an impact. And I've often spoken when we are doing work in our districts, street, sidewalk work, whatever, and I'm not going to bring up sidewalk work because it's not before us. But the point I'm trying to make is we have to be better at promoting, supporting our small businesses in particular. So I stand in support of Councilor Toomey's order. I plan to vote for it. I don't think it's egregious. I don't think it'll do any harm. I think it might do some good, but we won't know until we hear back from the city manager. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan, and then I'll come back to Councilor Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just make a few more statements as to my reasoning, and I wish to respectfully disagree for the sake of having a good debate on the issue. First of all, parking is quickly becoming obsolete. We have car sharing, we have autonomous vehicles. We're supposed to be using our transit, but that's deteriorating, as we know. We just passed a bicycle safety ordinance to promote more bicycle riding. We are aware of micromobility coming up. So investing in more car storage on our streets, taking up space that could be better utilized, is, in my opinion, moving in the wrong direction. And then our retailers are hurting, as we know, particularly because of online retail, and adding metered parking, unfortunately, does not really address that issue. So for those reasons, I don't think this is the right direction for us to move in.
I have Councilor Carlone, Councilor Simmons. Councilor Kelly, have you spoken on this yet? All right, let me go to you first.
Thank you. Regarding the last statement that parking is obsolete or becoming obsolete, we've seen a rise in the parking stickers over the past, I think, 4 years. Not a dramatic one, but a rise nonetheless. So, yeah, someday down the line, maybe we'll have no cars and no parking. But right now, that's not there. And to sort of think that maybe it's immediately on the horizon, I think, is just not the truth, or it's not the reality. We use parking meters for all sorts of reasons, and it's usually to push people away from spaces that they would be camping out in otherwise. And I think that's exactly the tool we want to be asking the Department of Traffic, Parking, and Transportation to use here to help our retail, which in fact is troubled in a lot of ways. And one of their big concerns is the lack of parking. So we're not paving over new spaces. I don't know why we would not want to utilize the spaces we have as effectively as possible.
I have Councilor Carlone and Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the question is the wording of the order. I just reread it and realized why some people might be concerned. It basically says install meters and then report back, instead of report back explaining why or not installation of more meters makes sense. I have no doubt that some businesses don't think it's an issue. Everything I know in retail is it is an issue. But if it isn't an issue now for some shops, it will be. I mean, if Arlington and Belmont have meters, if you don't have a meter, it basically means you can stay there as long as you want. Yes, you might get a ticket, but that's the game you play. A meter sort of regulates it. And I hate paying for meters, but I listen to them and I go back. And what you want is turnaround. Now, maybe the wording should be report, and then for the likelihood or the potential of installing meters, but the idea of meters is a good thing, not a bad thing. And if most of the city can afford a quarter every now and then, I would say a few of the areas that don't have this can certainly afford it as well.
Thank you. I have Councilor Simmons and Councilor Mallon, and then we should probably move this along.
Oh, why? In the spirit of vigorous debate, I think we should talk about it for another 30 minutes.
I'm not sure anyone's going to change their vote given this discussion, so we should probably just do it.
It might not even be about that, but that's another discussion. I don't know necessarily if I agree with parking meters being obsolete, but as someone that goes into our squares from Huron Village right down to Kendall Square, I do see the importance in the, I can't think of the word, the encouragement to move your car, or at least come back to it in a 2-hour period, depending on the square, because some squares have it. Harvard Square, I know the meters run longer. But the point I'm trying to make is I think it's a helpful tool to stimulate vehicular activity in and out of a space, moving people from, the parking space after they've done their business, as opposed to, as Councilor Carlone says, parking there over time. And I remember in this very parking for over the period of the time that the meter will run, that people would say that the cost of paying the overage at the meter was less than parking in the garage, and they would take the ticket. And so, but the point is, what are we doing to induce people to come in, visit our squares, go into our stores, and give the opportunity to somebody else? And so I stand with my colleagues in support of this order.
Thank you. Councilor Mallon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out that in Inman Square, where we're doing a huge amount of reconstruction, the one thing, or one of the things that the small businesses there asked us to do was to put in more metered parking to encourage more turnover, more places for their shoppers to come and park their cars. So I think that the executive director from the East Cambridge Business Association here was talking about whatever the city can do to help small businesses right now as they struggle is what we should be doing, whether that's recycling or composting. Parking may be becoming obsolete, but it certainly is not obsolete right now, and our small businesses are certainly struggling. And if this is something that we can do, we should be doing. And I thank Councilor Toomey for bringing it forward.
Thank you. So, on adoption, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Councilor Zondervan is recorded in the negative. The motion passes. I'm going to suggest that we move suspension to bring forward Policy Order 14 so these poor folks from Green Street can go home. Because given that we just spent 20 minutes on meters, it might be midnight by the time we get out of here. So, on suspension, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On bringing forward Policy Order 14, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Councilor Siddiqui, you look like you want to ask me something.
There's also Justin, who has been waiting for the Harvard students. So
Yep,
if
we
we're
can
doing
do that too.
I'd rather also then pull 18.
Which 18? Okay. On bringing forward 14 and 18, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We will go back to 14, that the city manager is requested to work with the appropriate departments and the MBTA to do whatever is necessary to alleviate the Green Street bus idling and unhealthy situation. This was filed by Councilor Zondervan and the Vice Mayor, pulled by Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is actually related to another order that we haven't discussed yet around the elevator work in Central Square, because this bus is there only while this elevator repair is dragging on and on. I actually looked up the address on Google Maps today, and believe it or not, the street view for that address shows the bus idling in front of this house. That's how bad this problem is. Nobody should have to go through this, and my apologies to the residents for having to deal with this. So, and the solution is trivial. All that needs to happen is for the bus to be moved back 10 to 20 feet, and it'll be out of their hair, and people just have to walk a few more feet. So I really hope that we can pass this order and get the MBTA to do the right thing here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, did you have anything as a co-sponsor? No? On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to Policy Order number. See, you waited for that. That was. We now move to Policy Order number 18, that the City Council go on record in support of the Harvard Graduate Students Union UAW's demands for a fair contract now, with fair wages, benefits, and a fair and neutral procedure for adjusting workplace harassment and discrimination. This was filed by Councilor Siddiqui, Councilor Simmons, myself, and Councilor Toomey. Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Simmons and I participated in a rally with the Harvard Graduate Students Union last month on March 12th, standing in solidarity as they continue to fight for a fair contract and have been fighting for the last year. There's no doubt that there's a serious power imbalance that exists in this situation. Teaching and research assistants at Harvard work at the direction of the same faculty who control their academic progress and their careers. We've had an email today as well from a faculty member who also recognizes that the history of abuse that exists. And so when I think about this institution and the fact that they're our neighbor, they're a big part of Cambridge, and their role as an institution that has a $50 billion endowment and who provides a nice looking annual report to us every year. And when I think about the issues that are these grad students, these residents, these members of our community are going through and dealing with, whatever we can do to support them, it's incumbent on us to bring that issue to light. So I hope that we can pass this. I want us to support these grad students, and we are going to be figuring out a way if there's a committee hearing that needs to happen, but I've been working with the students to figure out what the best way forward is, including making sure that the administration hears from us on the matter. And I hope that my colleagues will support this. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons?
Thank you. I want to thank my colleague, Councillor Siddiqui, for bringing this forward. As she mentioned, we did go and participate in the rally that happened in and around the Science Center of Harvard University. You know, we know that Harvard is an esteemed institution and there's a lot of goodwill and good things in our city, in our state, in our country. And this is the dark side. This is where they drop the ball, where they fall short. And it's unfortunate. It should be embarrassing. But I think it's important that the City Council, who has always stood up for the liberties for others that could not stand for themselves or stood and needed the support of others. So this is very much keeping in that work that we've done previously. So I too am hoping that my colleagues will stand with those of us that have co-sponsored this order and sending a message to the university saying, not here, not now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to my colleagues for bringing this forward. The anonymous university professor is my spouse who works at Harvard and unfortunately has personal experience with how disempowered the graduate students often are, and has to do a lot of work to protect them in some cases. So I'm very supportive of this, and I hope that Harvard University will see the light. Thank you.
Couple comments. So I think it was 2015 when the union was first forming. I just remember when I was speaking, it was very cold. I think it was 2015. And to see that, you know, that Harvard is still not acting in good faith is disappointing. Councillor Simmons mentioned that, you know, this is the dark side and the other side. You know, just many of us took part in marches when the Harvard-owned DoubleTree Hotel was not allowing their housekeeping staff to unionize. And people showed up and marched, and Unite Here, Local 26, and others, we were able to get Harvard, the DoubleTree, to allow a vote to take place. And Harvard sort of hid behind, well, we own the building, but someone else manages it. Well, if you own the building, you can tell whoever manages it to do the right thing. We marched with food service workers when they weren't being treated properly, and now graduate students. So this is not the first time. I hope it's the last time, and I hope Harvard gets the message pretty clearly that they need to take care of not just their students, but the people who work on behalf of their students, and that's not always the case. So I hope this passes unanimously, as I anticipate it will. If there's nothing further, on adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move back to policy order number 2, that the city manager is requested to work with the Department of Human Services to develop a plan for implementation of a citywide workforce development consortium. This is filed by Councilor Siddiqui, Councilor Mallon, Vice Mayor Devereaux, and Councilor Simmons, pulled by Councilor Siddiqui. You have the floor.
Thank you. I wanted to say that we clearly have laudable goals as they relate to helping our residents connect to jobs. There's city providers, there's nonprofit providers, there's MIT with its Job Connector program as a result of the Volpe zoning. And I think it's very important that these entities with similar goals talk to one another. And in the past, it turns out, talk to one another, work together. And in the past, when I spoke to the Department of Human Services about this, long ago in the past, they did have some kind of similar consortium where they did have a, I don't know if it's a quarterly thing, but there was much more communication than there is now. And I think it is important that, and we've seen models like this on different topics. Councilor Mallon and I, the mayor, have attended consortiums on children's savings accounts in the state, and that's a great. And that's what I anticipate the model here should be as well. Where if it's quarterly, we can decide how often it has to be, but that the private providers are talking to each other and thinking through challenges that come up. So I'm looking forward to working on this. If my colleagues have thoughts on the consortium and what it could look like, the Office of Workforce Development is all ears, and they're looking forward to working on this. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for suggesting this. I think it's a great idea and very timely as we talk about how the economy, the engine in Kendall Square isn't necessarily, favoring all of our residents. So I think it's great. One model, you mentioned models, I think is the work that was done leading up to the community benefits, the work that the nonprofit community did to really look at who was serving which populations, where there were gaps, where there were overlaps, and to try to target, how best to serve the most acute needs. And certainly having them talk about what the most acute needs are for workforce development. Where are we not, serving people in terms of there's opportunities and we don't have any of the programs. Everybody's training people for medical technology, but then there's this other thing that's emerging, and let's see if we can allocate some of our bandwidth to that. Councilor Zondervan was just mentioning to me today that in the building trades, the high school has training for carpentry, but not for electricians or plumbers. Anyway, so there's lots of, I'm sure there would be lots of great conversations just getting those people regularly in the room together. So thank you for supporting this.
Councilor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think just to piggyback on what the Vice Mayor was just saying, I think the idea of having a consortium and having the money groups that are working on workforce development in the city to talk about their challenges, talk about where they need to be addressing those challenges. I think identifying where those gaps exist is probably the most important part of having a consortium, so that we can be allocating and our resources where they need to go. As the Vice Mayor suggested, there's a number of building trades that we don't serve at the high school for a number of reasons. But there are organizations that do that in the greater Boston area. Could we have a Cambridge version? Do we need one? I think having this consortium coming together, whether it's quarterly or even more often, will help us understand where those gaps exist and what we would need as a city to get there.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to my colleagues for bringing this forward. I think this is a really important initiative, and I fully support it. We just approved $1.2 million tonight for a STEAM initiative at the library, and I certainly support that. But as we identified, we're leaving a lot of our students and young people out of our economy. And this is a really important approach to trying to begin to address some of that. One of the many needs that we're identifying as we look at, for example, our sustainable future is that we need to electrify. And that means we need a lot more people who are trained electricians who can install solar panels, wind turbines, and all kinds of other things. But we're not training people to be electricians in our school system. Similarly, we need a lot more people to work in farming so that we can be more sustainable in our farming practices. So I hope that as this consortium goes forward, we can really start to integrate some of these other aspects of our future, particularly around sustainability and thinking about all the different ways that people can contribute to that, not just looking at software and technology. And, I have to point out that, of course, I benefited greatly from those opportunities myself growing up, but not everybody has those talents and not everybody has those interests. So we have to provide a diversity of opportunities to our young people so that we can all benefit. Thank you.
Councilor Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Cambridge Redevelopment Authority also has some programs that should be included on this list. I would say who is not on the list, obviously, and we need to reach out to them as well. When we negotiated as a council with MIT on Volpe, we made them build a job training center, and the first aspect of that is looking at what exists and what needs to be done, and perhaps this consortium committee can meet with them in the near future and find out what they're learning and put the responsibility on their back to spearhead the effort. But this only makes sense. As far as what needs to be done, I think the city has a major role in this, much more than it has now. In fact, when I talk to developers about putting labs in or whatever's necessary for training for younger people or people out of work, almost the first thing they say is, well, what does the city have? What is the city organized? And there's not much there. I'm not questioning the dedication of people in the city. I'm talking about an overall approach. So I salute this policy order and will fully support it.
Thank you. Let me just jump in real quick if I can. So a few things. So Councilor Carlin, to you around the MIT piece, that conversation is happening. Councilor Mal and myself and Councilor Siddiqui, I think, was there too, have already been talking with some with MIT as well as some unions around the Pathways program. At RISTA, Orange School of Technical Arts, I've also had a meeting with a number of the trade unions to create a stronger apprenticeship partnership that's happening. RISTA does not, and I going back to my time on the school committee, actually, so when I was in high school, we had what was called occupational education then, and it was electrical and carpentry, and it was really the more traditional trades. That, I can't remember when it was, in the 90s maybe? I don't know if Councilor Simmons remembers, but we actually did away with all of our vocational programs, and we were just paying to send kids to Minuteman. Then we brought kids back and we started RISTA, and one of the things that, and I'll give a shout out to Fred Fantini from the school committee as well, and I would talk about is, you can't outsource a plumber, an electrician, and a carpenter, and an auto mechanic, and that these are still very good jobs that have been and still are the pathway to home ownership and the middle class, and maybe not home ownership in Cambridge, because a lot of those folks can't afford to live here anymore, but they can afford to live in many other places. And we have sort of let that slide for biotech and all this other, which are important as well because that's the industry also that's here. I will say that students who want to take a vocational, enter a vocational program that is not offered at RISTA, we are part of a consortium where they are allowed to take those courses in another high school that offers them. So, for example, there are a handful of kids that want to take cosmetology. Not enough that we would start a cosmetology program, but then we send them to other schools where they can do that. So, but that's also a lot of kids don't want to leave the high school to do that, so that's not a perfect solution either. So these conversations have been happening. One thing, the high school has these 2 machines. They're $500,000 a piece that do this some kind of, I don't even understand it, but metal fabrication. You plug in all the codes, you do all the programming, and then this cool machine kind of cuts everything. You can get a certification to directly enter the workforce, and those jobs pay about $70,000 a year. Now, that's for high school students, but maybe we should be talking, and this is why this is important, for those young adults who are out of high school and are part of some of the city's workforce programs. They don't get to access that training. So maybe that's we have the machinery right here, but yet in the city programs they don't get to access it. So this is really great, and so thank you for bringing it forward. But there's a lot going on in this space. So, Vice Mayor.
Just one additional thought. It sounds like there's something.
Speaking of, sounds like something's going to fall off the wall behind us.
It occurred to me that it might be nice to invite the Kendall Square Association to participate. They've been doing a lot of work on diversity and inclusion, and of course all of those companies are very anxious to make their workforce more representative of the city and of the world. And so they may be interested in participating to sort of understand, where they can help. So.
Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just on the last point of the Vice Mayor, I would say the life science industry in Kendall Square has a long, long way to go. I walk Kendall Square every day, and it's overwhelmingly 95 plus is all young white individuals. And so I'm not sure what light they're going to shed with us in terms of promoting, but you don't see any Cambridge people, except maybe in the food service industry, but it's just amazing. And I encourage people just go out, when people come out of the Kendall Square subway stop, they're all in the 20s and 30s, which is fine and everything, but it really, to me, is sad to see. I was at the opening of one of the food service establishments, and everyone working behind the counter was a person of color or clearly an immigrant here, and everybody in the line out the door was all young white men and women. So, for that great reason, we've been pushing this for years. Everybody here, for our students to be able to go into those jobs, and even some of the. I'm not going to name one. I know this right near my house, and that's a lot of the students come from other districts that are going in using those facilities. It's a lot of wasted opportunities that our kids have lost in that Kendall Square boom. It's just a little side for me on that issue. But encourage you, just go to Kendall Square any time of the day, and that's what you'll see.
And I would be remiss, Councilor Toomey, if I didn't thank you, going back to your time on the school committee, who has always been a supporter of our vocational programs and helping our young people get into the trades and other industries. And that's something that you've been a champion of for a very long time. So if there's no further discussion on adoption, all those in favor say aye, those opposed nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy order number 4. That the city manager is requested to direct the appropriate city personnel to compile a full accounting of streets, schools, and public buildings that may be named in honor of those who have ties to the American slave trade, and to work towards renaming all of these streets, schools, and buildings as soon as possible. This was filed and pulled by Councilor Simmons.
Thank you. I urge my colleagues to stand with me in the spirit and the intent of this order. The idea of it is to change a social, political, and moral wrong. Cambridge prides itself in the Commonwealth, in the country of a city that's not only progressive but proactive. And it's long since had these monuments to chattel slavery. If you read Building Old Cambridge, Architecture and Development, written by Mr. Charles Sullivan and Susan E. Maycock, on page 20, it lists a number of slaveholders, names that I'm sure you're familiar with, Vassal and Prentice and Boardman. Or you go further and read Owning Our History, First Church and Race, 1636 to 1837. I think it is important as we do things to be proactive about looking at microaggressions, blatant racism, sexism, and all the many other isms that plague our country, that we should stand as a model in righting a wrong or rewriting history in a way that takes people of color, and particularly people of African descent, out of the margins and on into the middle, and lift them up in a way that is not disparaging to them, their culture, or their race. And so it is my hope that my colleagues will stand with me on this order, which I am going to amend, that we not only adopt it, but to refer it to the City Council Committee of the Civic Unity for a little further discussion, because there's some other things I want to add to this. I hope that I have your support, and what I find is something that is a travesty, a wrong, that we, the citizens of Cambridge, those that have preceded us, that participated in, but that we will not be complicit in that participation, and will work together and changing it. I yield the floor.
Pleasure, Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my thanks to my colleague for bringing this forward. I stand in strong support. And, you know, some people will say, well, how far do we go? How far back do we go, and what names do we change? And my answer is we go as far back as we can. We can go all the way to the beginning, because there have been plenty of people in our history that we could honor instead. And so I don't think we have any shortage of opportunities to rename buildings or streets in a way that honor the people we want to honor for their contributions to our country. So I stand in full support, and thank you for bringing this forward.
Pleasure of the council. On adoption. Oh, on the amendment to refer to the Civic Unity Committee, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On adoption as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy order number 5, that the city manager is requested to direct the appropriate city staff to televise the Economic Development and University Relations Committee hearing on April 24, 2019 in its entirety, so that those residents who are interested in the topic but unable to attend the hearing will be able to view the discussion on their own time. Councilor Siddiqui.
Thank you. We are changing the date, so I'm going to move for an amendment to, the hearing will be on Tuesday, April 30th, 2019, from 12 to 2.
So
yeah.
I'm sorry. Is the time in the policy order?
Yes.
Okay. So you're from 12. So yeah. So it says from 12 to 2. So
We're
it'll
just
stay.
changing the
Just
yes.
changing the date then.
Change the date. Thanks.
Okay. On Councilor Carlin.
Quick comment. I've noticed since your last meeting, the committee's last meeting, there's 1 or 2 more storefront vacancies in my neighborhood. So I would hope you would get an update on the numbers, and just to see what the trend is. It would be very helpful. I'm sure you're planning that, but thank you for doing this.
On the amendment to change the date to April 30th, 2019, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to number 7, that the city manager is requested to direct the commissioner of the Department of Public Works to provide an update on the small business recycling program pilot, indicating any recalibration or reconsideration of the proposed program that may be necessary and any plans for expansion. Filed by Councilor Toomey, pulled by Councilor Zondervan. Councilor Toomey, would you like to speak first or yield?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I submitted this. I believe the manager sent us communication March 27, 2017, about this program that was going to begin in the fall of 2018, and which it did begin. And I know a lot of the small businesses are very excited about this, and it's been very helpful to the small businesses in recycling, and it's obviously great for the environment. And so the manager did say at the time about having a report coming back. So it's been about 6 months now since it's been implemented. So I just thought it'd be an opportune time for an update on this and whether we can even expand this. But I know a lot of the small businesses has been very, very helpful to them, and I know Councilor Siddiqui has been her committee on Councilor Mallon on the small businesses and everyone in the room. So if we can, if it needs additional funding to expand this, I think it's great. And as I said, it's great for the small businesses, and it's great for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I am very supportive of this initiative and want to thank my colleague for bringing it forward. Just wanted to give the opportunity to maybe ask about this in the upcoming Health and Environment Committee hearing on April 23rd. We will be discussing our zero waste master plan that DPW is putting forward. So it could be an opportunity to ask this question of the staff as well.
Thank you. Anything further? On adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy order number 9, that the city manager is requested to instruct the city solicitor to review whether the MBTA is out of compliance with the amended MBTA/BCIL settlement agreement through the delay in completion of the elevator replacement and concurrent hazardous condition of the stairwells related to Central Square. This is filed by Vice Mayor Devereaux, Councilor Zondervan, Councilor Simmons, and Councilor Mallon. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the elevator in Central Square has been out of service for a year and under repair, and it had been originally scheduled to be finished by now, and now it appears to be delayed. And so we've had lots of back and forths trying to figure it out. And since the policy order was submitted, we did hear from Representative Mike Connolly, who was in direct contact with the MBTA and posted an explanation on his blog, which is very detailed, and I won't go into it all, but long story short, there were a lot of unforeseen complications in this in this job, and I'm not even sure what a standpipe is, but it failed a pre-air test, and then we discovered 17 unforeseen existing conduits that needed to be relocated for the construction to resume. And because of the way this work is being done, it has to shut down the traction power in the train pit, which means that the work can only happen for the 3 hours in the middle of the night when the train isn't running. So at this rate, I don't know, it could take as long as building the pyramids to replace an elevator. I honestly don't know how other cities manage to do this, but our city, or our MBTA, seems to be encountering a lot of different obstacles. So we do now at least have more information about why there is a delay. We still don't really understand whether it makes them out of compliance with this legal agreement about ADA. I think that's still sort of worth keeping pressure on. And then separately, so if you aren't using the elevator and you're able to use the stairs, some of the stairs at that station are just downright treacherous. I mean, I grab the handrail every single time I descend them because ones at the top are just pitched at a really sharp angle, and if they're at all wet, you could go skidding. And so the state of repair in our T stations generally is miserable. And don't even get me started about the Harvard Square station. So I hope that this, can help our city manager have a little bit more leverage with the MBTA. And I'm grateful to Representative Conley for digging into this and hope that he will help us also advocate for these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure of the council. Quick question, Vice Mayor, because I believe it was going to, they said it from the beginning, it was going to be a 2-year, 1-year project? Oh, I thought it was 2 years. Okay. And I won't add this to an amendment, but I'll mention it to the city manager. That fenced off area is disgusting. The trash that is there that blows out onto the sidewalk, and so they also need to do a better job of keeping that area clean. It's, there's food back there. It's gross. Councilor Carlo.
Just quickly, the standards have changed since the station was built, and the sizes requirements have changed, and I bet that's what's started all the problems. And when my guess is when the conduit was put in and the standpipe, it met the code, and now, oh my God, it doesn't. What are we going to do? It's one of those. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying the MBTA is upgraded its ADA. Now, theoretically, the stair doesn't matter, because if you don't have an elevator, you got to go to the next station and come back and use the other elevator. But they're a very odd group to work with.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just flabbergasted that one could find 17 unforeseen existing conduits. I don't even understand how that works. So there's 17 conduits there, but we didn't know about them. That's just mind blowing. I don't know how we're going to get our T stations up to repair. I mean, I went down to the Central Square T station for the first time in several months because I've been recovering from hip surgery, and I was just astonished. I mean, the state of this repair is shocking. I mean, there's water dripping from the ceiling everywhere. There's puddles right next to the third rail. The paint's peeling off. The concrete's rotting. It's just unbelievable. So I don't know how we're going to get out of this, but we have to find some way to do it.
All right. If there's nothing further, on adoption, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We move to policy order number 11, that the city manager is requested to direct the commissioner of the Department of Public Works to provide an update on the feasibility study of expanding curbside composting program to small businesses and nonprofits by the end of 2019. This was filed by Councilor Toomey, myself, Vice Mayor Devereaux, and Councilor Mallon, pulled by Councilor Zondervan. Councilor Toomey, you're the lead sponsor. Do you want to speak first or yield to Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you said, the 4 co-sponsors of this actually submitted this in May of 2018, so it's been almost a year on this request of the feasibility of expanding the curbside composting program. I know we just did 13-plus unit buildings. Again, tying into our efforts to assist our small businesses and the nonprofits in the city, I thought it would be a good time to remind the administration that we feel that this is a beneficial thing, again, for the small business, nonprofits, and again, for the environment. So I'm just hoping to get a report back. I recently received an email, I think all of us did, from someone, I don't know, I might not amend this, but to also look at the public schools. Maybe, Mr. Mayor, you can check for the schools to also do composting. I'm not sure what the extent they do, but someone sent an email to that effect. But if you want to look into that, it would be helpful and report back to us. But this is just to request that the administration get back to us on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward. I want to offer 2 amendments, friendly amendments. I'm in full support. One is to add city buildings as well. I tried to put a compost bin in the green room. It disappeared, but we don't have composting available here in City Hall, except in the basement. And we similarly don't have it at 344 Broadway and other city buildings. And then my second amendment would be to refer this to the Health and Environment Committee. And again, as I mentioned, we do have a hearing coming up on the 23rd to discuss the Zero Waste Master Plan. And this, again, can be a question that we can ask in terms of the composting program plans for the future.
Okay, so question, are you looking to refer this before a report? Do we want to pass this and refer? Right, so put this, maybe put city buildings after small businesses, comma, city buildings and nonprofits, right there, in the order. Okay, and then on referring to health and environment. So on the First Amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Second Amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. If there's no further discussion on the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to policy order number 12, that the city manager is requested to work with the Traffic, Parking, and Transportation Department and the Police Department to increase traffic monitoring resources at the intersection of Prospect and Broadway, especially during morning rush hour. Filed by Councilor Mallon, pulled by Councilor Mallon, and I believe you have a substitute, correct?
That's correct. There's a substitute on everybody's desk that has red writing.
Or an amendment, I should say. Not a substitute.
Should we vote the amendment first?
We can, or you want to talk about it?
Sure, I'll talk about it. So the intersection of Prospect and Broadway in the morning is incredibly busy for a number of reasons. One, we have recently added in a left turn lane on Broadway going both directions, but there is not a left turn signal. So in the morning is sort of a free-for-all, people trying to take that left anytime they can, and there's a lot of little kids in that crosswalk, and people are sort of every day having some conflicts. We have a very nice crossing guard there who is doing, as somebody said earlier, yeoman's work, but he's just one person and it's very, very dangerous. And this order is just asking that the police department and traffic and parking looking to see if there's any additional resources that we could send to this intersection in the morning, just to ensure the safety of a lot of kids that are going to CRLS, to Cambridgeport School, Rock and Roll Daycare, the temporary King Open School. There's just a lot of kids through that intersection. The amendment that I have put in front of you is that I had another bunch of parents reach out to me this weekend that the intersection at Hampshire and Prospect is just as bad, and so we wanted to add in that particular intersection as the city staff is looking at these two intersections and saying the intersection at Prospect and Hampshire does not even have a crossing guard at this point. So just looking at the safety of our children in the morning. So the amendment is as follows. I'm adding in a fifth whereas that says the intersection of Prospect and Hampshire Street has a similar safety concern without the benefit of a crossing guard. Now therefore be it. And then in the first ordered after additional resources to monitor this busy intersection, there's a comma, as well as the intersection of Prospect and Hampshire Street.
Okay. Let's take those first, and then I have an idea.
Okay.
On those amendments, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Do we want to add, maybe after, as well as the intersection of Prospect and Hampshire Street, the Cambridge Police Department to explore using additional resources to including the possibility of adding a crossing guard to that Prospect and Hampshire Street? Should they have a crossing guard there?
So I was just leaving it open for additional resources, maybe a crossing guard.
So that could be that. Okay. I just read it as when I saw monitoring, I sort of thought of like
a monitor,
like a police officer there, kind of directing or whatever, but maybe, I mean, yeah, well, that could be.
I was just leaving it open-ended to
Yeah,
see if they could
okay.
come up with something creative.
Fair enough. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to 13. City Council support House Bill 771, Senate Bill 462, an act reducing plastic bag pollution, and in urging the chairpeople of the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture to advance the bill with a favorable recommendation. This was filed by Councilor Zondervan, Vice Mayor Devereaux, myself, and Councilor Carlone. Pulled by Councilor Carlone. Councilor Zondervan is the lead sponsor. Allow Councilor Carlone to go. Councilor Carlone. Or you'll defer. Councilor Zondervan. Rock, paper, scissors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councilor Carlone is the author of the Bring Your Own Bag ordinance, so he's quite the expert on this.
Former Mayor Davis might have an issue with that.
Well, I think he's responsible for the name. But I was proud to work with him and Mayor Davis on advancing this at the time. And part of the reason that we do these initiatives at the local level, even though people might say, well, you know, how many bags do we save if we do it in Cambridge, is that we build that momentum to do it at the state level and ultimately at the national level. And what we've seen is that 95 municipalities now in Massachusetts have some kind of restriction on plastic bags, and many more are considering it. So it's really high time that we do this at the state level. California has just done it. I think New York State just did something there. So hopefully we can support this and get our state legislature to take action.
Thank you. Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Zondervan. I couldn't be happier with any policy order than this one. When we approved this, it was 8 years in the council. And all we did was break it down in parts and then voted on each of the, I think it was 8 parts. And we said exactly the same thing as Councilor Zondervan said. The more cities that get it going, then the state will do it. What we kept hearing is, well, wait to the state, wait to the state. But in fact, in California, the state did it after, I think it was 80 communities did it, and they all had different laws. And believe it or not, the most liberal, the strongest, most progressive, I'll say, plastic bag ban is the liberal bastion of Texas. And so for Massachusetts not to move forward yet on this is pretty remarkable. I think it was 4 years ago, but we were the largest city on the East Coast to pass a plastic bag ban at the time. So thank you for including me, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
On the order, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to Policy Order 16, that the city manager is requested to confer with the police department about updating the Cambridge parking tickets database in the open data portal with the most recent information available. This was filed by Councilor Kelly and pulled by Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of amendments to correct it a little bit. This is a reflection of some kicking around I did during our meeting about taxis and TNCs and so forth last week, and trying to figure out just how aggressive the city is in ticketing people, for example, who are improperly parked in taxi stands is only possible up until about May of 2018, which makes it kind of difficult to have a cogent argument about what our efforts are. So my request is that the city update this data, but there are a couple of corrections I'd like to make. The first correction I'd like to suggest as an amendment in the last whereas is, instead of saying was last updated in May of 2018, to change that to read only reflects data up to May 2018. And then on the order, honestly, I don't know who puts in the data. The police department generally does not do ticketing unless it's associated with street cleaning. But it could very well be the traffic, parking, and transportation people who do the ticketing, but some other department who actually uploads the data into the data portal. So I would suggest amending it to read, confer with appropriate city staff about updating, and delete the police department.
Let's take the amendments. On the amendments, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Any discussion on the order as amended? On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to committee reports. Pleasure of the council. The question comes on accepting 1 through 3 and placing on file. Sorry.
Got to look here.
I'm sorry.
4, please.
You want to pull 4? Okay, yeah, I know, I saw that. On number 1, accepting the report, placing on file, and adopting the order. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On 2 and 3, accepting the report and placing on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Number 4, a communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis J. Carlone and Councilor Craig A. Kelly, co-chairs of the Ordinance Committee, for a public hearing held on March 27th, 2019, to discuss a zoning petition filed by Melissa and Christopher Gripo et al. To amend the zoning ordinance by adding at the end of section 5.30.11 a sentence that reads, quote, notwithstanding the foregoing, in Industry B District, a hotel use, section 4.31.2, shall be governed by the section number 4.0 for purposes of determining the maximum ratio of floor area to lot area. The question comes on passage to a second reading as amended and accepting the report and placing on file.
Just a quick summary, Mr. Mayor. This is the site where Emma's Pizza used to be. It's really a hole in the block now. And the basic proposal, this was an area that was downzoned slightly to encourage housing, residential development. That has not occurred. It's probably 15 years ago now, maybe more. And this whole zoning was to go from 2.75 FAR to 4.0, the equivalent of housing. And on this site, they did an analysis, a graphic analysis. It made all the sense. It was a relatively quick meeting, and all in at present, and there were at least 5 or 6 councilors there, voted in favor. So I encourage everyone to approve this and move it to a second reading.
Anything further? On adoption, passing to a second reading as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We now move to roundtable minutes. There are none. Communications from other city officers. We took care of that already. Any late resolutions or policy orders, Madam Clerk? Oh, Vice Mayor?
We have a late communication.
Right.
From me.
On suspension, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Vice Mayor Devereaux.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to provide an update to...
I have to read this,
Oh,
or unless you want to read
Oh,
it.
I thought you were calling on me.
I was, but now the clerk is telling me I have to read it.
Well, please, read it. You're doing so well tonight with the reading.
Gee, thank you. Could have taken me off the hook. Dear Madam Clerk, I would like to place the following on the agenda for the April 8th, 2019 City Council meeting as a late communication from city officers. To my colleagues, I would like to update you all on the search process to hire a new city clerk to replace Donna Lopez. See, I get choked up. When she retires at the end of her term, May 31st, 2019, capping nearly 50 years as a dedicated and respected City of Cambridge employee. And now I see why you wanted me to read it. A job description attached for the position was posted online and advertised as of February 27th, 2019. 36 candidates had applied by the closing date of April 3rd, 2019. An interview committee will review all the applications and conduct a first round of interviews to choose the top 2 or 3 candidates as finalists. The finalists will be interviewed publicly by the full City Council, following a process similar to that used to interview the finalists for the city manager position. The interview committee is comprised of Mayor McGovern, Councilor Carlone, and myself, which is Vice Mayor Devereaux, along with the City Council's Executive Assistant Naomi Stephen and 2 designated staff members, 1 each from the Personnel Department, the City Manager's Office, and the City Solicitor's Office. This was sincerely Jan Devereaux, Vice Mayor. Vice Mayor.
You did a great job of reading that. Thank you. I don't have anything to add. I think everyone is familiar with the process that we used to interview the finalists for the city manager position, which was to work with, well, at that point we had a consultant, but in this case we'll work with the personnel department to develop questions in advance, and it will be in a public meeting format, and we will be able to, the entire council will be able to participate in the selection of the final candidates. So I look forward to this process. I'm sure we will have a hard time filling Donna's size 6 or 7 shoes, and there will be lots of celebrations between now and then to celebrate her work, but this has to be done, and so we're going to try to do it.
Thank you. Councilor Toomey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly a process I'm not looking forward to, seeing our esteemed clerk retiring after almost 50 years of dedicated service. But this is very important communication. I really haven't had a chance to really look at it in depth, so it's going to be my intention. I think this is something maybe the public would like to have public comments on the next meeting, so it'll be my intention to try to write this evening.
All right. Any announcements? Anybody? No?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Kelly.
Science Festival starts next, I think, Saturday.
Yes.
Friday.
Councilor Mallon?
The next Arts Task Force meeting is this Thursday night at the Dance Complex, 5:30 to 7:30. The public is welcome. We are going to be discussing the cultural district and placemaking, so join us.
Anything further? Patriots Day, Monday, there will be Patriots Day observance at 10 a.m. at the Common. Folks should come out for that. Councilor Simmons?
Thank you. I just want to remind people of the 2019 Trailblazing Women event that's going to be April 24th, 2019 at 5:30 here.
Thank you. All right, if there is nothing further, on a motion by Councilor Toomey to adjourn, all those in favor say aye, those opposed nay. The ayes have it.